territory of the Sooke Nation, and that we recognize their government as well as their long-standing connection to the history of the sea, and we are very grateful. Okay, so Council, we do have our agenda here today, so a couple of changes to add. Firstly, I'll be looking for you to pass a motion to adopt the meeting with the addition of supplementary information to item number 7.2, Royal Roads District of Sooke proposed MOU. The addition of new business item number 13.1, the floodplain regulation exemption for Sooke Salmon Hatchery, to follow adoption of the minutes, and to move item number 13.1, the RCMP update, to immediately follow new business item number 13.1. Move adoption by Councillor McMath and seconded by Councillor Beddoes. Any questions? Okay, all those in favor, opposed, that's carried unanimously. And we have meeting minutes for adoption here, the regular council meeting of May the 13th. Move adoption by Councillor Bateman, seconded by Councillor McMath. Any questions or corrections? Nope. Okay, seeing that, all those in favor, opposed, and that too is carried unanimously. Thank you. So then that brings us to item 13.1, our floodplain exemption, 2895 Sooke River Road for new business. We do have a crisis on hand, and so I've asked staff to bring this forward as quickly as they can. So rather than me go on about it, I'll pass it over to our CAO to introduce and speak to the item. Thank you.
Your Worship, over the last week, since last Wednesday, city staff have been, or district staff rather, have been working with the Capital Regional District to put forward a number of motions before you regarding the floodplain exemption for 2895 Sooke River Road, the Charters Fish Hatchery. The resolutions that you see before you in item 13.1 are put forward in order to allow Council to provide the necessary floodplain, site-specific floodplain bylaw exemptions so that the project can continue to move forward as Council wishes and as we wish. Last Thursday, the building official and myself went out to the hatchery and put a stop work order on it after having been notified that the building was almost complete without having any permits issued and without having the floodplain exemption granted by Council. So since that time, a number of things have taken place, including the Capital Regional District staff really making a gigantic effort to getting together engineering reports and other documentation that you'll see in your supplementary agenda. It's important for us, I think, to acknowledge their efforts as well as the efforts of planning staff here in getting this information in front of Council tonight for your consideration. And it's our intention as administration to, if Council grants the exemptions or the if Council ratifies the resolutions that are before you, to, as an act of good faith and trust in the CRD's good intentions, to go out to the hatchery and take down the stop work order on the basis that, you know, on the proviso that the documentation that's required to issue the building permit is provided to us in a timely fashion, and it would be our intention to correspond with the RD staff and to tell them that we would like to receive that information by Friday, June the 7th. And I'd be happy to answer any questions at this point.
Okay, so by passing this resolution tonight, what you're telling us is that this will give staff the direction that they need from Council. Our building official can remove the the stop work in the morning. Mm-hmm. So work can get back, the volunteers can get back on site to do the good work that they're doing. Will there be any further Council action needed, or does this
Yes, Your Worship. There will be further information. There will be further reports coming to council on various items to deal with that project. What we are doing is taking that stop work order down in order that work can continue on the hatchery in order for them to be able to have the building in place in time to receive the fish that are going to be coming to them. I believe it's in late September, early October. Council's aware that this will not result in a building permit being issued until we receive the other drawings and other information that we are asking for from the proponent, which is now the CRD. The CRD has undertaken to provide us, or to accept the liability and responsibility for getting all this information to us in order to give us the opportunity to issue whatever documentation is required for the project to move forward.
Okay, and then with June 7th being the date that staff would expect this information to come, that would then, we have our next regular meeting on June the 10th.
June the 10th.
So then we can deliberate over those final pieces and conclude it.
Correct, and I guess at this point, if we intend to remain in close contact with the CRD over the next few days to ensure that we're apprised of what's going on and that they're apprised of and that they're letting us know about the progress of the project and the engineering drawings, etc. What we don't want to have happen again is for communication to break down between the people who are putting the project together in the district. We'd like to see it proceed as would council and as would the CRD, because it's a valuable project and it's been put together by countless hours of work from dedicated community volunteers who frankly deserve our thanks for donating their time and materials.
Yeah, absolutely. I do wish to share that I spoke with Carl Wilkinson. He's an engineer with J.E. Anderson. He's volunteering his services to make sure that all the whatever is needed is provided. So I did speak with him. He's just been quietly working behind the scenes. He's been working on this on Friday. I spoke to him before on my way to tonight's meeting, and we'll update him tomorrow. So he is aware of what's happening. He'll be on site tomorrow, and we'll just conclude it. So I understand that some of the costs for engineering, of course, with any project is yet another fundraising hurdle. They've graciously donated their time and effort to make sure that any outstanding matters are done. So I want to acknowledge J. Anderson. They've, I'm throwing out words, and it's just my word now, but they've done a lot of work here in Sooke, as you all know. Carl Wilkinson has been involved with the Consultants Derby for 13 years now. I was a volunteer in that committee many years ago. They fundraised $150,000 in that time towards Sooke salmon enhancement. He fishes here regularly. He understands how important. He knows what needs to be done. So I just want to acknowledge that. He's not just somebody who's making a name for himself. He is dedicated to this community and is applying his services. So I think that's really good that we have that. Okay, questions from council on the materials? Okay, sounds good. So we have the recommendation here. Sorry, let's just shut down here. So, okay, firstly, do these all need to be passed as individual motions, as 4 separate motions?
That would be helpful, Your Worship, yes.
Okay. So the first one is, whereas Brimmel Engineering Limited has provided a report and certification under Section 524(7) of the Local Government Act stating that the land at 2895 Sooke River Road may be safely used if the hatchery building on the land is constructed with a flood construction level of 2.1 meters instead of the 3 meters required by the flood regulation bylaw number 561/2013. Moved by Councillor Beddoes and seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Questions or comments on the motion? Okay, all those in favor?
Your Worship, if I may, the whereas is going to be going with that statement. So if the whereas and the first that can be done together, that'd be great.
Okay, and the second part, so...
Just a friendly amendment to include that statement with the whereas.
Okay, so the next paragraph.
Yeah.
Okay, so... No, I'm sorry. I was just thinking of process in my head. So that's been moved and seconded. So now the friendly amendment that I'm looking for would be that council exempt the owners of 2895 Sooke River Road from Section 524(6) of the Local Government Act and Section 6.1 of the Flood Regulation Bylaw number 561/2013 for the purpose of constructing a hatchery building at the described flood construction level of 2.1 meters per the Brimmel Engineering letter dated May 24, 2019. Friendly amendment by Councillor Beddoes, seconded by Councillor McMath. All those in favor of the amendment? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Now on the main motion as amended. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. The next part is that council exempt the owners of 2895 Sooke River Road from Section 524(6) of the Local Government Act and 6.2 of Flood Regulation Bylaw number 561/2013 for the purpose of constructing a hatchery building within 30 meters of the required present natural boundary setback, conditional on documents and assurances being provided to the satisfaction of the head of planning confirming the need of such an exemption. Moved by Councillor McMath, seconded by Councillor Beddoes. Questions on the motion? Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. And finally, that the owner enter into a Section 219 restricted covenant to the satisfaction of the head of planning and in compliance with Section 8.3 of Flood Regulation Bylaw number 561/2013. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor McMath. Any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Okay. So with that then, our CAO can now instruct our building official to remove the stop work tomorrow morning. Okay, so that's it for now. Thank you everyone for this. There is an opportunity for public comment just a little bit further on the agenda if there's any further questions about that, but I will likely defer to staff for if there's a technical answer that you're looking for here. Okay? Thank you very much everyone for your work on this. Corporate officer, did you? No? Okay. Sorry, I thought you had your hand up. Okay, so moving back into the agenda. Did we move? Sorry.
We're at 6.1 on page 2.
Okay, the Committee of the Whole. Okay. So here we have resolutions for adoption from the May 21st, 2019 Committee of the Whole meeting. Can these all be moved together in a block?
No, they may not be moved together as a block. Their resolution stands alone, and so they need to be on their own in order to.
Got it. Okay. So firstly, that Council received the presentation from Urban Systems updating Council on the progress towards completion of the District of Sooke Transportation Master Plan for information. Moved by Councillor Bateman, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Any questions? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed is carried unanimously. Secondly, that Council directs staff to proceed with the public and stakeholder engagement process regarding tree management and protection as outlined in the staff report and incorporate those discussions into the draft tree management bylaw. And that Council allocate $5,000 from Council contingency to facilitate public and stakeholder engagement. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Bateman. Discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thirdly, that Council directs staff to draft a notice of motion to the CRD Water Commission and Juan de Fuca Water Distribution Service advocating for extension for water services to North Sooke. Moved by Councillor McMath, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Fourth, that Council directs staff to invite Mr. Jeff Waitman from the CRD to discuss the opportunities for participating in a CRD-operated food land access program by way of delegation at an upcoming regular meeting of Council. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre and seconded by Councillor Beddoes. All those in favor? Opposed? Is carried unanimously. Finally, that Council directs staff to advise the CRD that Council discussion regarding the potential food land access program is still ongoing. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Bateman. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much for that. And very good discussion at that meeting, by the way. Okay, so I'm always looking because we move our staff sergeant up, and I always, although we do this each time, we moved you to the beginning, and I believed it was now a head of delegations. So welcome, Staff Sergeant MacArthur. And this, I will say, is MacArthur's final presentation to this council, as he will be stepping into retirement very soon.
Thanks, Your Worship. I thought I'd use my name tag for once there. But I didn't get a holder. Last thing I did was let these three out of jail here, so I'm glad. Just in time. I just give a brief report, Your Worship, and thanks for having me. We're going into the summer in Sooke Detachment better than we've been in my 5 years, with fully resourced and with nobody scheduled to transfer out, so that's looking good. So I'm done June 5th. I expect that Sergeant Clay Weeb will be in the acting position, possibly for a couple of months. The new Staff Sergeant Brett Sinden, who you met, is probably at least a few weeks away. His transfer hasn't come through yet for just a few administrative reasons. And then he may remain in Sydney. I'm not sure. They have a bit of a staff shortage themselves, so he may remain there for a little bit. But the office is in good hands with Sergeant Weeb there. Probably the most noteworthy thing of late would be a recent drug enforcement project that we've wrapped up, or we're almost wrapping up. We've arrested three people, and we executed one search warrant. They've all been arrested and released for trafficking, numerous counts of trafficking. Most of it was around heroin and fentanyl. So we had some success there. I expect that we'll be arresting 4 more people, or there'll be warrants out for them. So that was quite successful, and we had good assistance from our Island District General Investigations Section on that. So that's about it. Everything else is pretty much status quo, but I'm happy to take questions.
So a few things. Just when you say that we're fully resourced going into the summer, can you elaborate on how many positions that is now?
We remain at 17. That's 13 funded by the District of Sooke for provincial positions, and I'd probably be prudent to just elaborate that we don't have any issues with respect to the officers right now. Usually we go into summer, and sometimes we're down in a poor position, just the way it works with people selling their houses who are moving in, and Sooke being such a hot market, everyone sells within a few days, so sometimes we're short right till the fall. That's not the case. Unfortunately, what is the case is that our front counter staff have been kind of devastated, or going to be. Barb Cottingham, who's a retired member and was a corporal supervisor here and became a public servant, is unfortunately going to be retiring at the end of this month. And she was certainly a huge help there. We have one, our prime coordinator has been on long-term sick leave. We found another person to replace her who had the experience. That person has since decided to step down, and so that leaves us basically with 3 vacancies and our office manager. So yeah, kind of a dismal spot to be in, but she'll make do with casuals and part-time hiring. As you know, the public servant hiring process is less than desirable, to put it mildly. I've spoken here about it a few times. We don't start the process until the person in that position has actually left the spot, unlike any other organization, unlike any other business. That's the way it goes. That's what we're stuck with their collective agreement, and it usually takes us at least 12 months. So in the interim, we scramble to find terms and casuals. But it looks like that might be, hopefully they won't be cutting hours, but that is a possibility. It'll be a decision that'll be made without me.
Okay. Questions from members of council? Councillor Bateman.
Thanks for your 5 years, or it's 5 years, has it been?
Yes, sir.
Since Staff Sergeant Wright left. I'm
Yes.
really curious about you've served in a number of communities now. Can you give me a big picture take on Sooke, and tell me about Sooke. What's your takeaway?
Sooke has been extremely supportive. The population here is very supportive of us, so that's been enjoyable. I think as far as property crime, we're probably, and I think the statistics bear this out, we're probably better off than most communities. Drugs are, and we just showed this in our undercover project that we're wrapping up, is available as probably anywhere in North America right here, especially heroin and fentanyl. So that's concerning, but that was kind of my conclusion after being here for a few months, so it's not, that hasn't changed, but overall it's been, on a personal note, has been a fantastic transfer. It's very fortunate to have come down here. I feel very blessed. And professionally, I think the community's healthy from a law enforcement point of view. And I will add in that the detachment remains a little under-resourced. I know that that's something that you're dealing with. And the other thing is I've had great support. I've dealt with a few councils and have had fantastic support here, and we've really appreciated, made a big difference, the 3 positions we were able to add over the 5 years I was here. Thanks for that question, Councillor.
And what do you plan to do next?
Well, not much. Yeah, I said one of my favorite quotes from Bertrand Russell is, time you enjoy wasting is not wasted time. So I just plan to spend a little more time with my family. My father's got Alzheimer's and is still very enjoyable, so that's what I'm going to do. And then probably I have accepted a position in West Shore Detachment as a crime reviewer, 3 days on, 6 days off, but that starts in a little while. So, yeah. You're welcome.
Councillor Beddoes.
Staff Sergeant McCarthy, are you staying in the community?
Yes, I am.
You might be hearing from these 3 gentlemen in the front row.
Well, I still have friends at the detachment, so we can deal with them.
Yeah. Well, it's been an absolute delight to work with you. In the time that we've served, certainly the whole opioid crisis has really risen dramatically and impacted our community like many others. And I know that you've added that as well as just the growth of our community and with that some of the problems that occur. But I just really want to thank you for the open dialogue, for just being available, having just questions and clarity on whatever, and the ability to work together, planning our strategic plan, and then to give input into yours as well. So it's been very meaningful, so we're very grateful. And I appreciate that. I'm glad you're sticking around. I thought that we would see Daryl here tonight, though. I was a little disappointed about that.
Daryl had a previous engagement, Your Worship. Sorry about that.
Right.
Daryl's our comfort duck.
Yeah, it actually is a live duck, so I had to kind of see it to believe that one, but it's Sooke, so it's good. Just lastly, a question that I'd asked before that I didn't quite get the answer I was looking for. So what are the 2 biggest issues that you pull people over for in Sooke?
The 2 biggest, most common issues we pull people over for would be littering and smoking the reefer. Right. Your Worship. Yes, it is, actually. Yeah. No, it's not that far off, though. Yeah.
Since I am speaking on it, that actually raises one, because now I asked another question on the panel about cannabis legalization. Have you noticed any impact since legalization happened?
My opinion on that is different than I think a lot in law enforcement. And like Chief Mount and I presented on that, there's no impact that I've noticed. And it's not a drug we targeted in the last our enforcement project, and I'd be happy to take questions from anybody on that, because there seems to be a common misunderstanding in the discourse on the subject that we are introducing a drug. We're not introducing a drug. This drug was as available as it is today, only by black market distributors. So, and if you want to look at the statistics for impaired driving and whatnot, they're up because we now have people trained, people in place to deal with it. So in a way, we're also losing, I will say, getting back to the Super Troopers quote, that for drug enforcement, actually, marijuana use was a great tool, regardless of what your opinion on it is, because as soon as you pulled somebody over, if you smelled marijuana, whether it was burnt marijuana or green marijuana, that kind of gave you access into the car, and quite often, like I'm thinking of one guy in particular, is a very busy cocaine trafficker here, and he's been arrested a few times because of the smell of marijuana from his car. That's problematic. So I'd say as a law enforcement officer, if I was working still, I would miss that, having that tool. But
I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. We'll miss you here for sure. Don't be a stranger to us, and we hope that you'll be back sometime with Daryl in hand.
I'll bring Daryl in, Your Worship, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. And I, like I said, it's been my pleasure working with you, Your Worship, and various councillors, and as well as Councillor Parkinson, who I've been in touch with. I was kind of hoping she might be here tonight, but understandable. So wish her all the best as well.
Thank you very much. So a motion to receive the RCMP report. Moved by Councillor McMath and seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. You can take your nameplate with you too. Oh, yes. If you like, little parting gift.
I'll be waiting for signatures.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you. Okay, moving on into tonight's agenda. Our first delegation is on building permit procedure, and we have Les and Sue McDowell presenting tonight. If you could please come forward, and if you could please turn on the microphone. It's just a button on the base there. And we have 5 minutes set aside for you tonight. Just right on the base of the stem. Yeah. Yeah, we need to...
present to you this evening on the subject of building permits, the process, coordination, periodic build inspections in Sooke. While offering up simple solutions here, we are both seeking assurance. What we have witnessed and endured on either side of our property by an unchecked contractor will not be allowed to repeat. We also wish to be assured that Sooke will step up, one, on what Sooke councils up on their website, and two, more importantly, through your letter and connections with local media, remind and educate homeowners in Sooke to what can happen if basic due diligence is ignored. That it costs the homeowner, it costs those living nearby, and most importantly, it costs Sooke crucial time, cost and energy to sort when things go bad. Some background. We reached out to the Sooke Building Inspection Team as early as November the 5th, 2018, via email and with photographs to various Sooke Council departments as well. We also had to hand in a formal letter to Tony Bastone on April the 26th, outlining numerous questions on what we saw was happening next door to us. Some of our questions are fully acknowledged as being civil matters, but being a Sooke sanctioned build project, and after hearing and seeing how the contractor was operating, we soon realized the quality of work could impact our property if we did not reach out to relay our concerns early enough, environmentally, physically, and also in our probable property value after feedback from BC assessments. The contractor, chosen by both our neighbours, renovated a basement in one case and attempted to build a 2-story extension for the other. We observed inadequate basic site preparation, young workers coming, soon going after having to work unsupervised without safety gear, and our polite request for simple end-of-day, end-of-week clear-up of rubble and gear that had escaped onto our property was met with loud insults. People could have been seriously injured. At times, the contractor even had his pre-teen son on the premises. We fully recognise a general contractor is operating and allowed to operate with the permission of the homeowner who has hired him or her. That due diligence rests with the homeowner. But taking the challenges of the world today, getting a contractor, competitive pricing, it is often the con artists that grab and seize the opportunity. What specifically concerns us on the 2-story extension next door, do the setback dimensions meet code? Are the bylaw requirements requested? Are the sewer drain lines correctly hooked up? Will the final inspection agree with the design originally presented to and approved by Sooke? Learning from this episode to ensure a free-for-all mindset does not become the norm, to mitigate injury or excessive build cost increases through redos or BC assessment property tax reduction claims, can Sooke implement any of the following? 1. Ensure the Sooke building permit form points the applicant to basic guidelines for homeowners to hire the most competent building contractor as possible, encouraging, educating the homeowner to review basic contractor selection tips, references, past 3 projects, building a license and insurance paperwork. 2. Ensure Sooke deploy more time checking, interviewing build permit applications and applicants. 3. Ensure Sooke deploy more building inspectors to oversee the critical permitted build stages. Foundation frame prep for simple setback dimensional check at the concrete pour ready stage, at wall frame up, at the roof on, at window install to verify window shape, size and pattern, at overall project completion to confirm final setback dimensions, all meet and respect original permitted design. 4. Finally, ensure contractors not be allowed to govern any inspection stage. May I continue just to finish?
Yes, if you want to just finish. Sorry, I've
just
never
one
heard that before.
sentence, yes. As mentioned earlier, we do not wish to see anyone in Sooke treated in this way ever again. We also look forward to receiving a formal reply to our aforementioned correspondence to Tony Baston, which both Teresa Burkett and Don Schaefer assured us would be replied to no later than May the 17th. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Ms. McDowell, for your letter. Are you able to provide that to our staff?
Yes.
Oh, okay, that's perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll leave it with you.
So council will receive that. I will just say in the interim that we have refined our building permit process earlier. Our staff got on it this year and have cleared the backlog, so we're moving in a very 10-day turnaround, really. And then we've also have another building official joining our team in August, and we are in the process of bringing in a municipal engineer and then looking at if other additional clerking resources are needed. Yeah, so that's all in the works. But perhaps what we'll do is we'll just make a motion to receive this and for staff to respond back to the letter. Okay, so moved by Councillor Bateman to receive the correspondence and that staff draft a response back. Moved by Councillor Bateman, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Any questions? Okay, seeing none, all those in favour, opposed, it's carried unanimously. Thank you very much for your time today. Okay, second delegation tonight is Royal Roads, District of Sooke proposed MOU, Mr. Steve Grundy. And we also have some supplemental in the materials here. Welcome, Mr. Grundy.
Thank you. So I'm here representing Royal Roads University as the Vice President Academic. And I hope this is a fairly trivial undertaking in terms of an MOU. So just to say that we have we have several of these MOUs with municipalities, and I don't believe we had one with Sooke. And so this is really to formalise that. I know that our students do a lot of projects in Sooke and some with the municipality. And again, this just puts a framework around that for us all. And I thought maybe I would use this opportunity as well just to brief council on kind of things that I think may be of interest with respect to the university, because I think it is your local university. And I suppose the main thing I should mention is I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of City Studio. It was a concept that was started in Vancouver, and Mayor Helps in Victoria thought it would be good to move it to Victoria, and really it's a way for universities and colleges to partner with their local municipalities in terms of projects. It's really a kind of matchmaking system in a way, and I just thought it would be good for Sooke Council to know that we've acquired the license from the City of Victoria and moving it out to the West Shore. So there'll be lots more action, I think, with respect to matchmaking projects, if you like, that municipalities might be interested in and university students. The other thing I should mention, of course, that I think is of some interest is that we are in the, I suppose, middle stages, of an assessment for building an additional campus, probably in Langford area, particularly focused on serving undergraduate students from the Western communities so that they can avoid the massive commute that is currently a barrier for a significant number of students with respect to university education. So those are just two initiatives that I think that we've got in play that Council would be interested in. So with that, maybe I'll just open it for questions if you have any.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind. We had talked before, thank you, Mr. Grundy, about transportation and the barrier it is for our youth. Can you elaborate a little bit more so that everyone can understand a bit more about that?
We've been working with School District 62 a little bit, and so just so you understand this, the grade 12 to university transition rate is generally province-wide about 34%. In School District 62, which is your school district, it's 17%. So it's half of the provincial average for university transitions from high school. And as we went around the school district talking to teachers, talking to parents, and talking to students, it was clear that transportation was in fact a significant barrier. With the cost of education, people were finding the 2-hour commute to UVic there and back a little bit much. It's almost impossible, I'm sure many of you know, it's almost impossible to get there in the morning in less than 2 hours by public transportation. And I know the Mackenzie interchange may help a little bit, but probably for a very short period of time. If you look at the number of commuters that are expected to go into Victoria, it's on the rise and is continuing to rise. And of course, as you all know, the Western communities here, including Sooke and Langford, are currently now the fastest growing communities in BC per capita, with a growth rate of about 4.5%. And so if you just look at the community of the West Shore, it's scheduled to pass 100,000 in the next 4 or 5 years. So it is a significant community that is considerably underserved when it comes to university education.
So with the students that are not making the transition, though, in, let's say, right away from high school to university, has there been sort of a follow-up? Are they taking a year to save money to move into town and then to resume, or what's happening there? Are they just not pursuing post-secondary?
A lot of them are not pursuing post-secondary because the six-year graduation or 6-year transition numbers are also very low.
Okay.
I think part of it, of course, in the Western communities, as you know, there's a huge construction boom.
Yes.
And I'm sure we all know that it won't go on forever. And so when you look at the the actual general education level in the Western communities, it's quite a lot lower than provincial averages, in fact, just population-wide.
Okay. And that's where there's been the movement to work with Royal Roads to actually put a facility in Langford, ideally, is what's been discussed.
We're currently working on site selection, so but it would almost certainly be Langford. We need it to be accessible and on a bus route so it can be accessible for people from Sooke.
Okay. Questions, Councillor Bateman, then St. Pierre.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Grundy, for extending this memorandum of understanding, which in our agenda package tonight we have the memorandum of understanding from, I believe it was 2015, and yes, August 2015, and you've come up with a fresh one here, which is in the supplemental package, and some key words here is that there are no financial or resource obligations attached to this particular memorandum of understanding, but it does solidify an ongoing, it's more of a statement than a question. Sorry about that.
No.
But it solidifies this really healthy relationship.
Sure, you're right. There's no financial obligation. I mean, should we enter into agreements where there is financial obligation on either party, then that would just be a supplementary agreement.
Yeah. Okay.
Councillor St. Pierre.
This may actually be a question for either staff or mayor, but given the MOU that we have here, what's the expectation of council at this point in time? So we have a delegation. Are we going to pass a resolution to accept the MOU, or what's the next step?
We could do that. I mean, unless I hear from our CO otherwise, it's pretty straightforward that we could just resolve. Everything is signed off duly by myself and the CAO. Mr. Schaefer, is there any concern with council just passing a resolution to execute the MOU? Or would you like a staff report?
Not really, Your Worship. I guess if council feels that there might be a resource or a commitment to resources that we have in planning or other departments through this MOU, it might be wise to send it to us back for a brief report on June the 10th at your next meeting. If council isn't concerned that the MOU is going to add to the workload without an opportunity to have input into that process, then certainly a resolution to adopt it at this point would be appropriate.
Okay, because any projects that do come forward, we often discuss them as they come up. Right now, the students are doing a lot of work with Wildwise Sooke, which is great for us, but there's no real involvement, maybe a bit with Parks and Environment, just on some data there. So Councillor Beddoes and St. Pierre?
Through your worship to staff, I think your recommendation was that it does go to staff for consulting and then bring back to us on the 10th of June. I'd be happy with that resolution. Do it that way.
If that's council's wish, we can certainly do that. We'll have to have a bit of a tear down over it and talk about it at our next staff meeting in order to get something together for you. But either way council wishes to go, as Mr. Grundy said, if there are projects that come forward that require staff commitment to them, then we could provide those as supplementary agreements down the road if that's what I was hearing earlier on.
Yeah, as it's written now, I don't think there's any obligation on staff.
No. From what I heard from our CO, either is fine. We can get the report or we can just direct to resolve to execute now.
Yeah, to your worship, hearing that explanation, I'm okay with doing it now.
Okay.
As long as we're not obligating our staff time, we will hear if there's something comes forward that does obligate the staff, we will have another opportunity to say yay or nay.
We can,
and the same with funding as well. So I'm okay with that.
Yeah, as that arises, we can deal with that at the time. So at this point, just a motion that council direct the mayor and the CAO to sign the MOU. Moved by Councillor Bateman and seconded by Councillor McMath. Did you have a question, Councillor St. Pierre? I'm sorry. Go ahead. I missed you. Microphone.
I would typically ask staff, given that we've had an MOU in place for the last 5 years, whether or not this was taking a lot of the resources.
It's my understanding we didn't have.
And I thought I heard this was in place since 2015, or that this was a revised edition from 2015.
Councillor Bateman?
Yeah, as it states here, that 2015 memorandum was related to the development of a Sooke destination framework project, so I think it was very much tied in with
Completely different MOU.
Professor White's tourism project. This is a much broader,
Okay. Anything else on the motion? Call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. We'll get that back to you, and thank you very much for your time and all your work, Mr. Grundy. Look forward to hearing an update on that campus location.
Goldstream.
Okay. So we're moving into our public question and comment period. When you come up, we no longer require your address, just your full name, and if you wouldn't mind spelling it on the sheet of paper there, just so that we have everyone's names spelt properly in our records. So that's just a housekeeping issue, but we just like to know which municipality you reside in. We don't need your street address. Please come forward. Sorry, Miss. You can introduce yourself, Mr. Milne. Yeah. Yes, and if you wouldn't mind turning on the microphone, it's just so that we get everyone's spelling of names correct.
Good. Thank you. So my name is Wendell Milne. I live in the district of Sooke, and I'm on the board of directors for the Sooke Wanafuka Restoration Society, and I'm not here to slam council. I first of all want to thank council and the CRD who've put this thing together to get it here tonight and hopefully get it behind us. I just want to make a couple of comments. There's been reference to the fact that there's a lot of volunteers who have worked on this. In my time as mayor, I don't recall any stop orders. And I just urge staff and council, if this sort of thing comes forward, Tony Bastian or one of those people could drive down and communicate with us. This whole issue, quite frankly, has put a bad taste in the mouth of a bunch of volunteers. It's created a lot of community upset. So I don't know why staff couldn't reach out. I know staff are busy and have things to do, but it's a community project, and I think it's a big community project. There's $400,000 or $500,000 involved. We're dealing with fisheries regulations. We're dealing with our building regulations, dealing with the province on a bunch of water issues. So it's not simple, and it's being done by a bunch of volunteers in their own time. So I just urge council and staff to maybe think about something like this if it ever happen again. And we're not here to break the law. Like, we obviously want to follow the law and do what's required. That's what we're all about, and that's what I think Sooke is all about. But we feel it was heavy-handed, and I think there was a better way to do it. And so I'm just giving council some advice for whatever it's worth. I've never seen it happen before. I was in Vancouver. They phoned me, and I tell you, I nearly drove in the ditch. I couldn't believe it had happened because I couldn't understand why it had happened, because we had been, correct me if I'm wrong, had applied for a building permit, and Mr. Vowles and I believe a couple of other people had been in communication with the District of Sooke. So to say that you just heard that we were doing some stuff down on the river is not correct as far as I understand. So I'm just urging staff and council, get to know your community, and please don't let something like this happen without reaching out. First of all, if we told you to get off the property, we're not going to do it, then do what you got to do, but that wasn't the case. So anyhow, thank you for your time, and thank you for bringing it forward so we can get on with the project.
Yeah, and thank you very much for your advice, Mr. Milne. We definitely will take that to heart. Thank you very much for your work. Yes, sorry, if you could turn on the microphone, though, so we can hear you when you speak. Just one over. Perfect.
I'll just write my name down first.
Sure, thank you.
And my address.
We don't need your address.
Are you sure?
No address. Just where you live is fine. The
yeah.
address is a bit, we're sort of digging into privacy. It's not necessary.
Okay. So I'm Dave Saunders, longtime resident of the West Shore, longtime property owner, District of Sooke. My parents have been involved in our community for forever, all their lives. So have I. I'm here to speak to the hatchery issue in that I became involved when I heard about the hatchery, and I became involved because there's a direct impact to our salmon, a direct impact to our orcas, and there was a direct impact to the current hatchery that's the creek is not supplying enough water to basically let the fish survive. So I heard of the hatchery movement by Director Hicks. I said simply, how can I help? and he tasked myself with raising $1 million for the hatchery, as well as others. I can tell you very clearly that it's been hard, given the closures. I can tell you very clearly that I worked my butt off, as well as every single volunteer. We've provided our own personal funding. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention Shirley Valls, and I attended her celebration of life on Sunday, one of our longtime volunteers here in Sooke. And the theme of that concept and celebration of life was about volunteerism. And it got mentioned that Sooke is the capital of volunteerism in Canada. And I'll be very blunt, as I have been. I've sat in your seat, and I respect everything that you guys have done, and thank you for this exemption. But I can tell you very clearly and unequivocally that the stop work order has impacted our volunteer community enormously, and in particular myself. More importantly, it impacted the Valls family and was a concept and discussion at a celebration of life, which is completely wrong, and I'm sorry. This stop work order did not need to happen. It should not ever happen to a volunteer community project such as this. It would be untrue that Sooke did not know about this project. It would be untrue that staff weren't working with Wally Valls to complete this building permit process. It would be untrue to say that Sooke has finalized their transition from a draft bylaw that regulates building permit process to the degree necessary to put a stop work order on any building at this point in time without just cause. I can tell you very clearly there wasn't just cause. I can tell you that the professionals working on this site are all certified, and the volunteers have put in so much time and effort to save salmon in Sooke and save the orcas for numerous years. This has been a kick. The remedy, I got asked, because I phoned to our district, I got asked, how do we remedy this? The remedy was to involve the CAO, the mayor, and the CRD. I'm glad that's happened. I'm glad an exemption has been granted. My concern is the remedy for the Sooke volunteers and the reclamation of our good relationship with the entire district of Sooke, not just mayor and council. I can tell you very clearly that I feel personally that a simple written apology from the district of Sooke is warranted in this case to the society, and in particular Mr. Wally Valls and the Valls family. And a simple at the end of that letter, just like I did when I heard of the news of the hatchery, was how can we help? And not just the mayor and council, but the district staff. We all need to take ownership of this. It's a community facility. We've raised over $500,000 in kind. I can tell you that DFO closures have impacted over $250,000 that I had secured to finalize the building of this facility. I can't thank you enough for the exemption. Terry Young and myself are just finalizing the completion of a $60,000 roof free of charge. That building permit, stop work order, would have held that up. So thank you for the exemption.
You are over your 2
I know.
minutes, but I am giving you a bit of extra
And
time.
I thank you very much for this. It's an important issue. And I honestly feel that to get past it, that apology needs to take place. This community isn't about outside people that have come here with big city values. This community is community. This community is what I recognized in the celebration for Shirley Valls. And it goes back to the lionesses making egg salad sandwiches. It goes back to the community that I grew up in, that I continue to volunteer my services for. And without that apology, we're going backwards. We need to get back to the grassroots of Sooke, and in doing so, we need to formalize that apology. I thank you. But I also recognize, for the benefit of others in the audience and members of council and the district of Sooke, the DFO closures have impacted our Sooke area dramatically. I took 3-4 pictures today, one out in Renfrew at the marina there, one at the Prestige, one at our marina, but most importantly of Eagle Eye Business that closed its doors because of the closures last year. Now the Smith family that's been in Sooke for over 60 years owned that property where Eagle Eye Fishing business was. They decided to sell because they just couldn't basically say, well, we're going to go out and find a new tenant. It's hard to find new tenants. They sold that piece of property. Eagle Eye gave back to our community tenfold in relation to the orcas and in relation to building salmon for the orca stock. So the impact of the DFO closures, the impact of the recent denial of funding from our own provincial government and the federal government in relation to our hatchery is absolutely appalling. And I urge Council, and I thank Council for your support, but I urge Council and the district staff to become involved in our hatchery, champion our cause, and speak out against the closures. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Saunders, for your time. Other speakers this evening? Okay, so we'll move on in the agenda into 9.1. Our first one is an agricultural land reserve exclusion for 2701 Otter Point Road. And I'll turn that over to staff, please. Okay, just a moment, Ms. Everts. Council is just wanting a bit of just time to reflect on what we've heard and the ability to ask some questions, clarify, or state otherwise. Councillor Beddoes?
I mean, I understand about volunteerism. I've been a volunteer in this community for 30 years myself. Very much in favor of the hatchery and all these things that are going on. But I'm not quite sure that what was said was entirely accurate. And I would like our CAO to maybe give a little bit of a timeline, because I don't think it was... is that possible, Your Worship?
Your Worship, to answer Councillor Beddoes' question without getting into a debate or further inflaming the issues with the volunteers who I think feel aggrieved, and I understand their frustration. My position on the issuance of the stop work order was that for a number of months the district had been trying to get a flood plan, as we outlined earlier, a floodplain exemption, get documentation sufficient to bring to council to issue a floodplain exemption, a site-specific exemption as opposed to a general one, and hadn't received it. While we had been assured a number of times that the documentation was coming, it wasn't forthcoming and didn't appear to be anytime soon at one point. So I emailed the proponent and said, here's laid out very specifically what we needed, quoted the legislation. Didn't receive a satisfactory response, and by the deadline that we felt forced to apply, had not yet received any of the documentation that we required. Not only documentation sufficient, but really didn't appear to be forthcoming. Any further documentation that would have been different than what we'd already received. So, well, I completely understand how this has impacted particularly a couple of individuals in the volunteer community, and that was not the intention. However, it might have rolled out. We felt that we had to issue a stop work order in order to ensure that that the proper floodplain boundaries existed, that the building as it was planned was going to be constructed in a safe manner. Whatever might have happened in the past in Sooke, however appropriate or not, I believe it's important that that everyone be held to the same standards, that buildings that are constructed in the district have permits, and that documentation is provided in a timely fashion and not 4 or 5 months after the fact. And as I say, I mean, I understand that there are different perspectives on that issue. I wanted to clarify as well that the decision to put the stop work order up was not initiated by council. As you know, I informed council of the decision to put the order in place. Right around the same time I was doing it, council has really no authority to issue orders to building officials one way or another pursuant to the Building Officials Act of the province of BC. It was strictly a staff issue and strictly a staff decision based on the fact that we hadn't issued permits for the construction of the building, and that was not something we entered into lightly or that we thought was even necessarily going to be a positive step. But if buildings are built in the district of Sooke, they need permits, and that's what the law provides. That's what our building bylaw provides. And while, again, as I say, I understand the frustration and frankly the anger that the volunteers feel towards that action, we do have a building bylaw, and we answer to provincial legislation. And if we're going to progress as I think, and I realize that there are people in the community who feel I'm from away, and but some of our municipal staff have been here for a long time and have dedicated their entire working careers to the district of Sooke. So the fact is that I believe that in any municipality that I work in, buildings that are constructed need permits, and the fact that we have received over the course of the weekend the documentation that we had been hoping to get from the proponents for a number of months shows that it could be done, and that we can issue the building permits when we get the documentation, and we will.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. Councillor St. Pierre.
I think I'd like to address something that may not be entirely understood, and that's just the way that these things flow. Council, guided by the OCP, helps to shape bylaws and policies with staff, and then staff actually follows those policies and doesn't actually have a choice in terms of following those policies. They're bound by the rules that are set out. So when they follow through with a stop work order, that's because that's what the policies say and that's what the rules say. They don't necessarily have the latitude to change things on the fly because this is an amazing project that should never be stopped. The rules are those. Now, I happen to agree that we might want to re-examine some of those policies in terms of, maybe we need to be advised when there's a stop work order in the works so that we can actually, somehow avoid the entire problem. That would be nice if we had those rules and policies. But as it happens, we don't. And because we don't, our staff followed the rules and policies as laid out by this council and previous councils and all the rest. That's the way it works. Now, if we want it to work differently, we need to change the rules. And your input is useful for actually trying to change the rules. But then the rules need to be changed. Deciding willy-nilly to change the rules is actually part of the reason why we have legacy issues in this community that we're going to be dealing with for a long time to come. And we're trying to come out of that sort of nonsense. So we can actually have everyone knowing what the rules are and following them. So just...
Thank you, Mayor and Council. You'll be hearing from because you're hearing the truth. Thank you.
I must be really offensive. Don't mean to be.
Councillor McMath.
It's obviously a very emotionally charged issue, but the simplistic look at it is a communication breakdown. And with communication, it goes both ways. Not interested in pointing fingers, shaming, the comments made that council and staff should contribute and should volunteer and get to know their community. I found it irksome because those comments are made by someone who perhaps doesn't know what the staff or this council do. And speaking for myself, I coach a girls' ball team in Langford, which Dave Saunders did for 10 years. I volunteer at the hatchery on my days off. I have spent over $200 out of my own pocket to go to almost every single DFO public conversation, including the one with the department, the Ministry of Department of Fisheries. It's not that the district is blocking or slowing. It's just that a communication breakdown has happened, and both sides should learn from it. And in regards to the apology that's being requested, what people may not know are the incredible amounts of emails that were received by council and staff. That it's one thing to be, passionate and fiery, and I like a little bit of that, but they were grotesque, disrespectful, derogatory. They were off base. They were very, whomever they're getting their information from, it was incredibly inaccurate. And instead of asking the question, why is this happening? How can I help? It's been a borderline slanderous, disappointing couple of incoming comments, and it's on social media as well. And so rather than the shaming, it's back to the comment like, how can we help? But that goes both ways, and that's the only thing that I wanted to touch on for that.
Thank you, Councillor McMath. And councillors, for your feedback. I'll just add that support the hatchery. We want to get it done. I don't want to lay blame. I don't want to accept blame for something that I had not done. I want to acknowledge the work of our staff, all the volunteers, everyone that has contributed, all the fundraising, everybody. It's an amazing project, and we just need to see it done. It's time to come together as a community and to move forward. And when I hear something like that, I sometimes just need time to take it in and reflect on it. That's my personality. I don't always react. I need to find a way forward. It doesn't mean that I'm not caring. It doesn't mean that I can't fly off the handle on every single issue that comes this way, or I'll be ripped apart. I have a full plate, as everyone else in this room does. It doesn't mean that I don't care. I'm unfeeling. I do. I just tend to have a delayed reaction sometimes on how to move. I am being accused of a number of things, so I need to process and deal with that and seek legal counsel as appropriate and determine what I want to do with that. Probably nothing. Yes, I answer to the community, and I'm very sorry that this happened, but let's just move forward together and have it done, and that's where we're at. Both Mr. Schaefer and I have been working on this nonstop since Wednesday, sort of Wednesday afternoon into the evening, all day Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, on my drive into this office here, and here we are. So it's not that it was like, oh, okay, this happened and whatever. No, there's actually been, how do we solve it? And I've bounced a number of different resolutions to our CO. Can council legally do this? No. Council has in the past done things that we then had to spend money legally to correct because it was not in our authority to do. So I have to be mindful of that and respectful of the work that our staff is doing with the laws and policies that they have to abide to. That's what they're governed their profession. That's why we hire their expertise. In terms of understanding what the problem was, I'm not an engineer, so when I read that, I don't know, and that's where I mentioned Carl Wilkinson because he was able to digest it, repeat it back to me in a layperson's term, and then solve it, and that's what we want to see happen. It is demoralizing for volunteers, and I can think of other projects in this town where maybe not stop works, but certainly volunteers were put to stop on matters that were important. Businesses that want to expand, daycares that need to grow, and just the various barriers that they're facing. So one by one, we are looking at addressing them fairly for everybody, because I think that's important, and then it's something that people can look back on. I hate that this whole thing happened. It's heart-wrenching. It makes me sick, and really, it's time just to pull together. I was at Martha Moore's celebration of life on Saturday. And what I recognize in my takeaway there is what a community builder, like what a person who really draws people together, people from all over Sooke, from many different corners of the community, young people and seniors, retirees, just a dynamic individual that always saw what needed to, like, okay, let's not point the finger, maybe sometimes she did, but let's just work together and get this done. And I really applaud that. And I want to recognize this council, your support, your desire to move forward, different perspectives. Let's just find a way and let's move on. This has been a social media disaster, but I tell you, from where I'm sitting, there'll be another one in 6 months. Because that's what always happens. There's another one, and the platforms get more. There used to be guidelines, there isn't. It's complete free-for-all, and apparently there's a fake profile with my name and posts happening out there. So I haven't posted anything on the matter. If anyone does see my name out there, I would like a screenshot of it and to send it to me so I can ask Facebook to take it down, because it's certainly not mine. So when I get accused of something like that, no idea what you're talking about. Because it wasn't me. And I know that other mayors across the country have the same problem, and that's just the world of social media. So whatever, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm not going to get upset about it. It's just a reality of the work. But I'm sharing that with you because that's something that's floating out there. It's not my doing. But let's move forward. Let's move together stronger, and let's work together. And there's always room for improvement. So that's where I'd like to leave that. Okay. Ms. Everts, and thank you everyone for listening to us. I appreciate that. And let's get into our business. 9.1, Agricultural Land Reserve Exclusion, 2701 Otter Point Road.
Thank you, Your Worship. Tonight we are here for an ALR exclusion for a portion of the property located at 2701 Otter Point Road. The owner wishes to exclude a portion of their panhandle-shaped property from the ALR for the purposes of constructing a small suite. This slide shows the subject property in red. The green hatching indicates land within the ALR. The portion within the ALR is approximately 31 meters wide and parallels the rear lot line. This cuts the panhandle body of the subject property in half and is approximately 2,400 square meters in size. The use restrictions for the ALR property, paired with the setback requirements pictured on this slide in red, restricts the usable portion of the property. Of the properties in Sooke with a splitting ALR boundary, 2701 Otter Point Road is the only known property that is a panhandle in shape. This unique context is the basis for a staff recommendation in support of excluding the portion of the property from the ALR. Most policies in the OCP support agriculture and food security when and where appropriate. Applying these policies to a portion of a panhandle property does not meet the intent of the OCP or Community Roots Agricultural Plan, especially given that the subject property has not been used for farming purposes in recent history. This slide shows how treed the subject property is for context, and further contextual photos are located on pages 8 through 11 of the report. And finally, Policy 8.5 states that Council must review the application and resolve to do one of the 4 options on the screen. Staff recommends option 2, which is highlighted in orange. Please note that if approved by the Agricultural Land Commission, an OCP map amendment will be required and will be brought forward at that time, and that the owner is in attendance if Council has any questions for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Everts, for the fulsome report. I had heard, and I don't know, I can't even reference where it was, that the LR is, or the LC is, like, are they still open and willing to review exclusion applications like this? Because when we passed a resolution to support exclusion on the last one, I was surprised to hear that they had turned it down, and then I heard that they're basically shutting down every exclusion, and I don't know if that's a new policy. It's nothing that I have read coming out from them, but I was surprised at of that determination. I am in support of this. I just wonder, like, you know, depending on what how Council feels, like, is there something more that we write in terms of the position that why we're supporting the exclusion to you know, if that's kind of a mindset that's happening there.
Your Worship, I can't speak to the ALC. They haven't changed any of their policies in terms of the exclusions. They did change their uses, and they kind of diversified their applications for different uses within the ALR and became more restrictive when it came to residential uses especially. Like council, every application in front of them is contextual, and the commission will be basing their judgment on that context. They do receive the resolution from you as well as my staff report. And throughout the process, I'm included in every email and updated frequently. So the ALC is always in communication with the planning staff about any of the applications that we move forward to them through the portal.
Okay, so that's good. They'll get your staff report as well. Okay. Questions, Councillor Beddoes and St. Pierre?
No, not really a question. This seems a pretty straightforward request, and I'm fully in support of it.
Councillor St. Pierre?
I also support it. Would like to add, though, that I don't think that this particular property would ever be farmed as a primary, even a secondary source of income, just given its size and the way the housing is situated. I do also find it interesting, though, that at this point in time, there are questions as to whether or not this might be permitted as an exclusion. My sense is that there is an entrenchment in terms of these things. I do, however, think that we need to address food security and maybe work very strongly with the ALC in terms of pushing these models so that we can actually make things happen. I think they're just getting their legs with the new legislation. They're trying to figure things out. But I think now's the time where, though they might be still entrenched in a siege mentality of, we must protect farmland for future generations, we also have to push for food security and try to work with models and put them forward if we can. So I suggest that this is another opportunity to try and work on that.
Thank you. Councillor Bateman?
I'm absolutely in support, and I'd like to move that we forward the application to the ALC with a recommendation to support the application.
Okay, so move the recommendation as it is. So moved by Councillor Bateman, seconded by Councillor McMath. Anything further on the recommendation? Councillor Bateman?
Well, I just note that the previous ALR exclusion recommendation we made on Phillips Road with the Parsons property, I believe it was, it is indeed contextually very different to what we're seeing here. So I think the staff report will certainly support the moving ahead. And I just had this curious thought. Wouldn't it be great if the rental agreement to this, I'm looking at you two back there, assuming you're the ones, included a provision that the renter be responsible for tending and intensively producing food in your backyard raised garden. But that's, maybe so. Okay.
That's great. Anything else on the motion? Councillor St. Pierre?
Just a quick follow-up on Councillor Bateman. I had made a note here that the property might actually produce more food with additional housing, and it seems like that might actually be the case. Because one of the issues we're having right now with parcels, especially anything above 2 acres, is it's actually too big for a single family and the occupants of a single home to actually farm it effectively, intensively. So actually having a little bit more density on agricultural land makes a lot of sense when we're looking at a transition away from a fossil fuel-based model of agriculture, and we have to move towards people-powered agriculture. So you need more people for that to work, and I'm glad to see this sort of thing happening.
Great. Okay. Anything else from members of council? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Is carried unanimously. So we'll send that off, and if we can get an update, but good luck anyway with the application. Okay. So item 10.1 is next, and that's Sooke Courier.
Your Worship, sorry. Apparently, along with the report, staff, I guess, is looking for public input.
Oh, pardon me.
Are we not in a public input session right now in the agenda?
Well, we had public comment on everything with the agenda, and but I didn't ask
It just specifically excluded it in the screen, so we're just making sure.
Okay, sorry, thank you for flagging that. And pardon me to members of the public, would anyone like to speak on the land reserve exclusion? We did carry and pass the resolution unanimously, but still, if you oppose that, we can make changes or revise it. We're certainly able to do that. Nothing? Okay, thank you for catching that. Okay.
I see a typo in that.
What is...
It said fur, not for. Second last line, just a comment. I know it's a tree property, but...
Okay, so if that could just As long as that's not impacting anything, that would be great. Okay, thank you, Councillor Bateman. You have such a good talent for that. Wow. Okay, so 10.1, please. Sooke Sewer Specified Area Amendment Bylaw. And Mr. Howard is presenting. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. Tonight we're here to consider the inclusion of the property known as 1747 Whiffenspit Road into the sewer service area. The District of Sooke has received a petition for local area service and enlargement of the Sooke Core specified area known as the SSA from the owners of 1747 Whiffenspit Road. Access to the municipal wastewater collection and treatment system for this property was made possible with the installation of the sewer infrastructure by the developer of 7010 Wright Road. When the infrastructure was installed, allowances were made for the existing properties on Wright Road to make connection to the system. Request for inclusion into the SSA is a requirement prior to making that connection, as we all know. The owners of 1747 Whiffenspit Road request inclusion of the property into the sewer service area, again, the SSA, so they can construct a garage. They are seeking the ability to connect to the municipal system in order to construct a proposed structure in a location which would affect the existing septic system which was constructed in 2008. The applicants advise they plan to construct a 3-vehicle garage as per the attached proposal. Staff have confirmed the proposal meets the land use requirements for the building permit. Previously, in 2011, Council adopted Bylaw 509, which permitted the addition of 4 other properties on Wright Road to the sewer specified area, followed by the addition of 7033 Wright Road in July 2015. These properties are shown on Map 1. I've got to go back to Map 1. As you can see, they're identified, the properties that were included into the sewer service area were identified on the plan. The approximately 817 square meter property is zoned RU4 residential. The owners have requested inclusion of their property in the SSA to allow for future construction of a 3-vehicle garage, as previously indicated, in a location that would affect their existing septic field. The property lies within a community growth area as identified in the official community plan and is long-term goal to provide sanitary service to properties in the community growth area. And I'll leave it at that, and I'll take questions if you have any.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Howitt. Any questions from members of council? Councillor Bateman?
Yeah, I was curious in a general sense. Can I assume that all the neighbors in the area have been notified that we're discussing this tonight? Or is that not done in a situation like this?
Through your worship, the adjacent property owners in this instance are not notified of this. It's just the procedure of this pursuant to this type of bylaw.
Councillor St. Pierre? Turn the microphone on.
I'd like to move the motion.
Okay, so that is that Council received the petition for local area service for the property located at 1747 Whiffenspit Road, legally described as Lot A, Section 5, Sooke District, Plan 16620, PID 000320811. Can we do it in a block? Okay, and that Council give first, second, and third reading to the bylaw cited as Sooke Core Sewer Specified Area Amendment Bylaw number 737-147-37-2019. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Beddoes. Any questions, comments? See none. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Okay, 11.1, 2019 Road Improvement Program Tender Award. Welcome, Mr. Derrick.
Good evening, Your Worship. I got 2 reports tonight. This one should be fairly short. I'm presenting for the 2019 Road Improvement Program. We tendered the works as shown in the following 2 maps. We had about a 3.5-week tender, I believe, and received 2 quotations. Both of them were submitted completely and by qualified contractors. The winning bid was Capital City Paving at $627,750. The other bid was Island Asphalt Company at $651,650. Our budget for the works this year is $700,000, which leaves a nice 10% or so contingency. And the recommendation is as follows, written in the report. So I'll take any questions if there are any.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Derrick. That's good news that this project actually came in under budget. That hasn't been the case for quite some time, but it certainly has with the road work. So with the contingency that's available, because there was the budget of $700,000, that will be available perhaps on hand should some unknowns come about or an opportunity to address another section, perhaps?
Yes, Your Worship. It's being a unit price contract. It's based around, estimated quantity, so it really comes down to where the real quantities fall. And I base my calculations this year off what we found for quantities last year, so it should be relatively accurate, but you never know what happens when you're on the ground.
Okay. And will this work also include like repainting of lines and such, like stop lines or crosswalks, that sort of thing?
Through Your Worship, no, there'll be no line painting associated with this project itself.
Okay.
None of the roads that we're actually paving have painted lines on them to begin with.
Okay.
But we do take note. I think Winfield has a stop bar where it intersects with Grant Road, so small things like that will include once our long line painting is finished and we know the final prices for that, that's when we'll start doing stop bars and crosswalks for this year.
Okay, because you're doing this section, I'm thinking of the playground that's on Pirate, because that whole road is being done there, and then just where Pirate intersects with Beaton, there's just been...
Yes, Your Worship, I was going to say that the road currently it's been some time since it was in good enough condition to actually paint, so that'll be an option now that it'll be a real surface.
Yeah, it will, and also, it's just a busy area because of the playground there. Okay, questions from members of council? Councillor McMath?
So you said there's about a 10% buffer, but what if they go well over that? Then what?
Through Your Worship, generally as the contract progresses, we kind of control quantities, so I set it up in our initial meeting with them that as soon as they kind of reach the $650,000-$670,000 barrier, they make me aware of it so that they don't go over quantity or over beyond our budget anyways.
But at the 650 mark, then like my preference would be that you would get like a notification like halfway through, because at that point then you could sort of triage the roads or make a decision. But if they pick and choose and then they get to that amount and it happens to be a road that's not in critical condition, they just chose it because something like that, is there a way to have a stipulation that they check in with you on the halfway mark to see if like their quantities are matching the progress?
Through Your Worship, we receive fairly regular quantity updates, like as often as I ask for it. If we kind of pay attention to it like daily and weekly to make sure that things are kind of progressing. Like these type of projects happen so fast. For them to do $620,000 worth of paving is about a week's work. So it's not like it's a long process. We kind of just keep track of it and we see as the quantities go down if they're progressing as anticipated. So it's kind of up to me as contract administrator to keep that stuff in check as the process goes on.
And typically does this group come in on budget?
Through Your Worship, I haven't dealt with Capital City Paving since I've been here. Our previous contracts were with Island Asphalt Company, but they're both very reputable companies in the region.
I think last year they came in with the work we were doing. We were under budget and managed to do a few bits and pieces here, and it went just fine. Yeah. Do you know when you're intended to do this? What week?
Yes, Your Worship. They're planning in their tender. They anticipated that they would be doing it early August.
Okay.
So that's their plan initially, but it's subject to change.
And will this hamper any access to Broomhill Park?
It should not hamper any access really to anywhere. The work will be done during the daytime, and like I said, to pave Pyrite Road is a few hours worth of work, so then you can access it from the Beaton side. So there won't be any significant delays anywhere.
Perfect. Okay. Any questions are there any other questions? Councillor Bateman?
Yeah, good news about the budget, I must say, because I think during the 5-year plan discussions, we were anticipating as much as $100,000 increase on this contract. perhaps. So wonderful price point. I was wondering about sidewalks and line painting and long line painting, and I did the drive round, and these are not norms in Sooke secondary and tertiary roads. Though, as the mayor says, at the playground, perhaps that's where we might want to put some painted lines in to ensure traffic calming, and given the activities at that playground, children and young families and strollers and all that sort of thing. It's just the thought. My other thought related to the Merrick Place improvements, and I guess these are going in part because the DCCs are being paid by the developers in that area.
Through your worship, this is a renewal project, so it's actually not DCC related at all. All the money's coming out of gas tax and I forget the other source of it, casino revenue, I believe.
Now, given that construction has not begun, is it wise to pave when there's going to be a lot of heavy trucks and equipment rolling up and down those streets?
Through your worship, with the Winfield intersection, there will be increased traffic on there, but realistically, we're doing an overlay, so if anything, it'll kind of curb the decay of that road, because right now it's pretty significantly cracked on the hill going down to Grant Road, so sealing that up should actually, rather than have trucks rip out big chunks of pavement, we're hoping that it kind of holds it together better. And for such a small stretch of road, it's fairly insignificant, so it's almost nicer to just cap it now and then see where it's at in 5 years.
Okay. And I do have this Opus report from a few years ago, which identifies the 5-year road improvement program, and these are the year 2 roads. I know that the funding for this 5-year program, I think, was redirected from previous 5-year plans off of the connector road funding. So we made a determination to go in this direction, and I'm curious, these roads are in decaying state and they need to be acted on now. This is municipal best practice.
Through your worship, yeah, absolutely. The road improvement program kind of was the baseline for our asset management plan to deal with roads, and all of these roads were identified. The only small additions were, I think, Red Place and Melrick they were slated to be done in about year 7, but just because we're in the neighborhood, it just made the most sense because everything connected to them is new pavement, so we're not going to get a contractor back right on those roads, so we may as well do them now.
Okay, so looking for a mover that council authorize staff to award the tender for the 2019 road improvement project to Capital City Paving Limited in the amount of $627,750 plus GST. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor McMath. Anything else? See none. All those in favor? Opposed? Is carried unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Derrick. Oh, and you're up again for 11.2.
All right, so the second report to present is to present the West Coast Road Sidewalk Project. And so this project is a collaboration with the Ministry of Transportation, where they're acting as project manager and principal sponsor, and us as the main stakeholder and kind of co-sponsor. We've been working through various iterations of the design and feel like we're finally in a place to bring some questions to you about how you'd like to proceed. So the overall objective of the project is to connect sidewalks from Otter Point Road all the way down to Whiffenspit. Due to the scale and cost of the project, we've obviously got to phase it. So the first phase of this project is between Otter Point Road and Ed McGregor Park. The work is estimated to be approximately $1.1 million, of which MOT will provide $900,000, and we're expected to pay the remaining $200,000. Significant cost overruns, unexpectedly high tender prices under this agreement would require additional approvals by both council and MOTI, and they could be, if they were rejected, it would just mean we'd cut down the scope of the project to bring it to within current funding limits. Small overruns will likely be covered by MOT contingency, although they're kind of predicated on the 80%, 20% cost share of the ministry providing 80% of that. Major additions to the scope of work as it stands, such as including ornamental street lighting, lengthening the project, widening the project area, would be borne 100% by the district. So essentially, MOT's budget for this right now is $900,000, predicated on a $1.1 million project, but if we felt we wanted to make it a $1.5 million project, we're paying that extra $400,000. They can't contribute any more than what they're already doing. So now that the agreement's covered, looking at the existing condition of West Coast Road, we have a raised asphalt sidewalk on the north sidewalk, and we have a asphalt curb with maybe a slightly 1 inch to 2 inch raised asphalt sidewalk on the south side of the road. The works in between Otter Point Road and Ed McGregor Park all fall within town center, so they're subject to the town center plan recommendations, which generally for sidewalks in there, they ask that wherever possible we have 2.5 to 3 meter wide sidewalks, and they also ask that wherever possible we have red brick pavers, stamped concrete, some type of textured surface that looks nice. So moving on to the options, hopefully you've had a chance to look at these because I don't know how they'll appear on the PowerPoint. Option 1 focuses on following that town center plan as best as possible. It uses red brick pavers for the entirety of the job. On the north side of the road, in between Otter Point Road and Shields Road, we're looking at 2.5 meters wide, except for a small pinch point by the building on the corner of Shields Road. That's something where, as we progress with the design, though, we'll hope to work with the property owner to see if we can get some sort of easement or right-of-way to make the sidewalk a little bit wider there. On the south side of the road, we're utilizing as much of the right-of-way as possible, which equates to a 1.8 meter wide sidewalk, except for right across from Shields Road, there's a pinch point where you can see that property line juts out, and in that position, it gets down to 1.5 meters wide. The road lines and lane widths are essentially the same, although there is the addition of a 1.1 meter wide bike lane on the side of the road, which isn't quite up to code, but it's the best we can do with the 18 meter wide right-of-way in the area. Our town center plan with the 3 meter wide sidewalks is hoping for a 20 meter wide right-of-way, but we just don't have that until further development comes in or extremely expensive property acquisition. Looking at the extents of the project, this option has the north sidewalk terminating just before the post office parking lot, and it has the south side of the road terminating about halfway through the Hope Center. There's full pullouts for buses with 3 by 10 meter wide concrete pads, which could, in the future, house a bus shelter, which is a program we kind of work separately with BC Transit on. But the shelters themselves wouldn't be included as part of this project. Also included as part of this project would be underground conduit for ornamental lighting, so we wouldn't have the light standards themselves, but when it came time to install those in the future, it would be considerably less costly than having to rip up the sidewalk. Option 2 focuses on kind of getting a little bit more bang for our buck. On option 2, in front of the PharmaSave Center, that's the only place where we have the red brick pavers. Everywhere else on that project is standard gray brush concrete for the sidewalks, and because of the cost differences, you see the north side sidewalk ends at the same place, whereas the south side sidewalk makes it all the way to Ed McGregor Park, to the exposed aggregate sidewalk that's right in front of there. So the major differences really between the two options are the surfacing, having red brick versus concrete. Red brick is approximately, based on our estimates, 2.5 times the cost of brush concrete, which detracts from the scope of work, obviously. The cost between the two options is very minimal. The red brick option might be $1.16 million compared to $1.1 million of the option 2. But like I said, that'll likely be absorbed in contingency and just real world costing, because it's all estimates. Red brick paver also has a higher maintenance cost and has a shorter lifespan and requires more maintenance, and the maintenance needs like slightly more specialized contractors in order to perform. As for the financials, due to the tight nature of our budget, MOTI has given us the option to pay $100,000 in 2019 and then defer the remaining portion to Q1 of 2020 to match with the end of their fiscal year. So with that in mind, these are the basic recommendations. I guess before we get to the recommendations, the one thing that I'll say is that the options are not final. They just represent basically kind of two opposite trains of thoughts, one between getting value and one between sticking to the town center plan as best as possible, and that changes and tweaks can still be made, and that's kind of your chance here to take those back to the design process before we go any further. So I'll hand it over to you.
Got it. Thank you very much, Mr. Derrick, for the report and for the options. Okay, so, Councillor Beddoes and then St. Pierre.
Yeah, I'm interested in option 2. Of course, we said more bang for a buck, we get more sidewalk. How many linear feet of more sidewalk is it? Just give me a guess. I don't need an exact amount.
Through your worship, I believe it was somewhere between 100, I think it was about 170 meters more of sidewalk for having the south side.
Well, then I'm certainly for favor of option 2. The other reason is the snail's pace of putting sidewalks down. We want to make sure this sidewalk lasts before we get to the other end, and I'm not so sure it would with pavers, but thank you for that.
Councillor St. Pierre.
I was curious. Oh, it's already on. I was curious about the conduit that's going in and whether or not, given that there's a lot of commercial and parking around there, whether or not it was possible to put some options for EV infrastructure because you're putting the conduit in anyway.
Through your worship, that's definitely something that we can talk about with the MOT design consultant. It sounds like a great idea.
Other thoughts? Design 1, design 2. I'm really torn on this because I like the idea of getting more sidewalks, but also we have the guidelines, and our town center it doesn't just stop at Otter Point Road. Like, it does go further, and that sort of defines where it is. And then when we looked at the development permit for the Evergreen Mall, it's like carry this through, like into the site and add it there and not just have it stop to a more affordable yet not as attractive option. So in some cases, when you go ahead, it's always like in 10 years from now where people are walking down the street, it's like, well, why did the brick end? Did they run out? Like, it just ended. And I get that it moves slowly, but then next year we can look at the next section and carry on. I just think that it's attractive. It's nice. And then we add in lighting and colorful rocks, and it's just an attractive area. I mean, at the same time, people need sidewalks. I mean, there is sort of that sort of like a trail, I guess, that you can walk on that side of the road to go to Ed McGregor Park. It kind of gets narrow and the like, so I like that we'd have something proper there to encourage walking. It just sort of keeps extending, and I think that's where the decision is, at what point do you stop it? Like, how far does it go? How far out north and south does it go? I mean, really, it's the town center. Go all the way to Maple Avenue, is my understanding, is how far we would see that travel. And then it would go to more of a multi-use option that we see on Wadham's Way. So it's just more like in 10 years' time, where did the brick go? All they wanted to save money. Well, too bad, because now you won't rip up that sidewalk to put in the brick. You just sort of live with it, because that's how it is. I'm in favor of option 1, I think. But I want to hear more. Councillor McMahon.
I'm in favor of option 2. Sorry. Just because I constantly hear from everyone that Sooke is not walkable. And so rather than, I think about it like a house. You don't buy your decorations before. The more important thing is that you have that house, you have that access. So rather than waiting for things to look perfect all the time, I think that the more pressing thing is that it's walkable and that you have that accessibility. And so at 2.5 times the cost, I would way rather have more sidewalk. And so that's where, although obviously I'd prefer brick the whole time, I'll definitely be going for number 2.
Councillor Bateman.
Well, I'm siding with the mayor on this one. Option 1. Okay, so aesthetic values. I did ask some friends about this, and the comeback question was, well, what's on the other side of the road? What does it look like from Otter Point east? And indeed, there are red brick pavers and those lovely stone rock inlays. It serves and brightens up that portion of the town center. It certainly serves Village Foods and Evergreen Mall, the 2 malls there. We have Cedar Grove Mall, which in due course will be redeveloped. We have the other side of the street, which also will be redeveloped in time. This is phase one of a project, so that extra 170 meters will be built in due course. I heard something about this. Boston, city of Boston has had red paver stones on some of their streets since the Revolution, American Revolution, and apparently they stand up relatively well. And they can also be replaced individually. You know, if a concrete slabs break, but an individual tile or paving stone can also be replaced. So there's a $50,000 difference. And given how the town center, you know, our roundabout portion of the town center has just, you know, I had Steve Grundy was here earlier, and he was on Mayor Milne's advisory panel on economic development, and job one was to improve the look of our town center above all else. So I think this would add some additional improvements. So, yeah. But either way is great. I mean, here we are in the first world. We'll be able to walk safely down our streets.
Well, just add, though, that, like, where the strip mall is, where we have Little Vienna and the optometry, like, they've done a lot to beautify that particular area to make it attractive. And so that's where, to not have the nice sidewalk, go there. Like, when you think of, like, the businesses, like, why does it always, when we did the first part, why does it end on Honor Point Road? Like, what about everything west of us that we want to encourage people to walk to and to get to safely in our park, right? And our park at McGregor, it's lovely. So it's just carrying this attractiveness through to that. So question I have, is there like a stamped concrete option that would be a good balance between two, that would still be attractive and durable, but maybe more affordable?
Your Worship, that's definitely something we can look into. Like, I don't think MOT pursued that option when they were doing their costings. They kind of just wanted to look at kind of the two ends of the plate, just to get to give you guys a good feel of the difference between the two options and what that meant towards like the overall scope of work. And to correct myself earlier, I think it's somewhere between 70 to 100 meters extra. Now that I don't have the measurement in front of me, but just based on remembering things.
Right. Councillors, I'm not sure who was first, Councillor Beddoes and St. Pierre? Councillor, okay, go ahead.
Well, just the other aspect, too, which seems to be forgotten, is the maintenance of this, the brick. It costs a lot more to maintain. I think that was said in your brief. And I've laid paving stones. I know what it's like, and I've seen driveways that had a vehicle run up on them and rip up the paving stones, and I've seen driveways where they've had brushed concrete and there's a black mark on it, and that's all. So my concern is that, yippee, it looks a little bit better, but we're in the business of doing some safety in this community too with sidewalks. And boy, 70 meters, 100 meters extra sidewalk for $1, I don't think the average person is going to really notice that there's pavers there or not. Where it's important, I think, is in the very downtown core. But there in that location, I'm not sold on it, and I'd rather go for more sidewalk and durable sidewalk that we're not having to fix in 6-7 years because it's torn up.
No, that's fair. Can I just reply to that before I'm getting right into this debate? I remember when the roundabout went in and we were talking about the design and the like, and there was all this flurry that the logging trucks would rip all the brickwork apart and it would be a big mess, and all these logging trucks and vehicles going over it, and they would destroy it and we'd be replacing it in no time. And it's still there. It's still there. There are some skid marks from Alberta.
How many years has it been? Not many, so.
Well, 2015.
Give a logging truck a chance.
Yeah, it's like 4 years. Anyway, Councillor St. Pierre.
I'm really interested in the mayor's suggestion of stamped concrete. I think that if we could actually have a stamped salmon run, that would be really fun. I think that when I think about this, I also think of Councillor Parkinson and what she might want in terms of beautification. So I really would like to have those extra 160 meters of concrete, but I'd like to have some efforts to make it appropriate to Sooke, to make it interesting to walk, to find a nice balance. And I think we can do it. but I don't know that the bricks are really the way to go, although I do like the fact that they can actually allow water back into the water table. I think that's an excellent advantage. But we desperately need some sidewalks, so I'm hoping that maybe staff can bring forward some options in terms of some beautification of concrete, I guess is where it's coming to for me.
Is that a possible option, Mr. Jared, just so we can find an in-between and just see if there's an appetite to progress that and just what it would look like?
Through your worship, absolutely. That sounds like a great idea, because one of our kind of fears with the pavers was that because we don't have the full right-of-way now, and because we don't know when those lands are going to develop, it's doing a 1.8 meter wide, brick paver for sections is not necessarily, I don't know, when you think about brick pavers, it doesn't seem as sturdy and robust as when you're looking at a 3 meter wide paver sidewalk. So it's kind of a partial build scenario to begin with until we get that right of way. So something like stamped concrete might be, ideal, because it kind of is the best of both worlds. It looks great in the meantime and then also holds up.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. So in order for you to keep moving forward here, because the intent would be, I guess I just got some feedback from our corporate officer that we move this all in one block and not section it out. But in this case, is it appropriate to move something now, given that I'm seeing that there is a bit of an appetite to see if there's a happy medium here? Do we just bring the report back with that answer, or?
I think you can just sort of jig the first part of the motion.
Okay.
So that it says that council, and then skip by to direct staff to liaise with the Ministry of Transportation Infrastructure on the design of the Otter Point Road to Ed McGregor Park Sideway project,
okay,
and then continue on from there.
Okay, and just finally, has there been any discussion with the ministry about putting in a crosswalk? It would be great if there was one a little further along, say, like from a Hope Center to Ed McGregor, because whenever there's events, like it's very difficult to cross there. Like you really need to cross in a pack, or it's so hard to get back across the road.
Yes, Your Worship. Actually, before we cut the scope to meet with the new cost estimates, the plan had initially been to have both sidewalks go to the Gatewood Trail, so to the other side of Ed McGregor Park, and at that time we had a crosswalk at basically right where the Gatewood Trail spits out across the road there.
Okay.
So I'm hoping, I hadn't spoken to them about that with those drawings, but I was going to reignite that conversation because they said it was safe sightline wise, so I'd like to have that crosswalk put in even though the sidewalk isn't going that far, because I think that's an important crosswalk to connect. That's a major dog walking place and just human walking place to go from the Gatewood Trail across to Ed McGregor Park.
Absolutely, and if you can encourage them that it needs to have push buttons to stop traffic, because people really, like you drive at a pretty good clip there and then suddenly you're stopping, and we're seeing that in different places where there isn't that. Like if you're more in town, people are moving slower, but when you're coming that way, the traffic is moving a lot faster, so I would just encourage that they do that at the same time.
My only quick response, so that would be something, we spoke about that at the time, and I believe that's something that would be coming out of our pocket likely if we were to ask for it. However, it's a possibility. Like it's
right. Well, we're getting people across their highway.
Yeah. I think they would allow it. Like when we spoke about the warrants, they seemed open to the idea of that. They just, yeah.
Okay. No, thank you very much, Mr. Derrick. Other feedback or comments? Everyone's okay just getting some details on an in-between and what that looks like? Okay. So in one block, it would be that council directs staff to liaise with the Ministry of Transportation Infrastructure to refine the selected design for the Otter Point Road to Ed McGregor Park sidewalk project. That council authorized a transfer of $100,000 from the Capital Asset Replacement Reserve Fund in 2019, and that council directs staff to identify funding for $100,000 in the 2020 financial plan to accommodate the district's required $200,000 contribution to the project. Moved by Councillor McMath and seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. And then will we get a report back on that design that we can then discuss that that'll be our follow-up report then, so we know?
Yes, Your Worship. I'll put together a report once we go a little bit further in the design project or process with this input.
That's great. Thank you, Mr. Derrick. Anything else from council? See none. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. That's great. Thank you very much. Exciting work. Okay, proposed strata title conversion of previously occupied dwellings for 2005 and 2005B Gillespie Road. And that's over to Mr. Howitt. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. We're here tonight to talk about the strata conversion for 2005B Gillespie Road. The District of Sooke has received an application to register a building strata plan on the property located at 2005 and 2005B Gillespie Road, which will convert 2 existing detached single-family dwellings into individual lots with a registration of a strata plan. As you can see on the plan, there's the parent property. The district is not ordinarily involved in the registration of a building strata plans in the RU2 zone when multiple houses are constructed and stratified for the individual ownership. However, in this case, because 2 of the buildings have been previously occupied, they require council's authority and must be approved for the conversion before they move forward. As you can see the 2 existing dwellings on the property and then the future dwellings as depicted on the plan as well. Policy 8.6, Residential Strata Conversion Policy 2010, provides the applicant with the opportunity to seek approval in principle from council prior to proceeding further with the strata title conversion process to ensure that all the requirements be met for the conversion of the 2 previously occupied dwellings. Approval of the final strata plan will be granted. The way this is going to work is the 2, if council chooses to go this route, the 2 existing dwellings would be approved in principle for the conversion, and then the other 2 buildings would be built in a moderate time, and then a plan of subdivision or a building strata would be deposited with a notation on the plan identifying that the 2 existing have been deposited under the conversion policy of the district and the legislation. Policy 0.86 applies to only strata title conversions of single-family or 2-family dwellings. The policy allows an applicant to seek approval in principle, as previously discussed, and if granted, the applicant will work with staff to ensure that all the technical requirements have been met before the final strata plan is presented to council for approval. And again, when the final plan comes forward, you'll be looking at the 2 existing dwellings, not the other 2 that will be shown on the plan, and that will be notated on the plan by the surveyor. Seeking approval in principle at the beginning of the process provides certainty to the applicant before incurring costs involved to provide the documentation required to meet the strata conversion requirements. The approval considerations for council are listed into the report, and they're items number 1 to 5, and I think that you could have a look at it, and if you have any questions at the end of this, you can ask me then. The applicant advises that the long-term tenants currently occupy each of the 2 existing homes being considered for the strata title conversion. They will continue living on the proposed strata lots A and B as per there is an attached letter in your package. Because the 2 existing houses received final occupancy in 2008 and 2011 and were constructed under permit from the District of Sooke, a building code compliance report will not be required because they do meet code. As per council policy, should council grant approval in principle, the applicant will have 1 year to finalize any additional technical details with staff. Once all the items have been addressed, staff will bring the final strata plan, again with notation about the 2 existing houses being the conversion approval. We will be bringing it forward for your final approval. From then, it would be deposited in the Land Title Office. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, Mr. Howitt, for the report and all the information here. Questions from members of council? Seems straightforward to me. Okay, so yes, Councillor Beddoes.
Motion that we grant approval in principle.
Microphone.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion that we grant approval in principle for the strata title conversion of the 2 previously occupied dwellings on the property legally described as Lot A, Section 71, Sooke District Plan, EPP 20458, 205, 208B, Gillespie Road. And
can we move it as a block? Okay, keep going, please.
Okay, and that the council direct staff to work with the applicant to finalize all technical details relating to the application before bringing it back to council for consideration of final approval of the strata plan.
Okay, and that's just the process of how this works?
Yes.
Okay, so seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Anything on the motion? Nope. Okay, I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. Great, thank you very much for that. And then I guess we'll see you back on when we get that report back. Okay. Next one up is our Lot A report. And I believe our consultant is here this evening. Yes. You'll be reporting for us? Yes. Oh, excellent. Come on up, please.
I've been told I have an hour. Is that? No, I'm just kidding.
An hour?
No, I'm just kidding.
Okay. Probably not. Actually.
We'll stick to the highlight reel.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, Council, staff, and the public for attending today's wrap-up of the Lot A design charrette.
Sorry, but can you just introduce yourself, yourself and your partner? Just yeah. If you
my name's Niall Paltiel. I'm with Keycourt Planning, and we're the lead planning consultants on the file. And with me today is Stefan Schalzen, who's with Stantec, and he was the architect that we had hired on the file as well.
Excellent, thank you.
It's my understanding that the Mayor and Council have had a chance to receive the report and review it. If you have any questions throughout this presentation, don't hesitate to jump in, or I can do them at the end, whatever serves you best. To kick things off, I'd just like to start out by acknowledging Sooke Council, staff, and the many organizations, members of the community, and the general public who came together to make this possible. I mentioned it our previous on January 21st when I was here at committee. Charrettes really work when members of the public who are interested and engaged come forward and roll up their sleeves, and that level of engagement really makes for a quality product. And I'd like to thank everyone who came out to provide that engagement. It was excellent. Just to go through our table of contents, we'll go through the scope of the project and the values that were expressed during our initial visiting and throughout the process, recap of the charrette and how we got to this point. I will be brief on this because once again, I know we did go over this on January 21st, so I don't want to rehash too much of the same, but I will update Council with the findings from the February 27th open house that was conducted following that meeting, and I'll go into a bit of what we heard from there, and then finally I'll go through the recommendations on the short, mid, and long term for Lot A on the schedule, and finally answer any questions, and I've provided a draft recommendation. So to go through the values really quickly, I just thought I'd start with, once again, starting out with the Lot A history. The District of Sooke in 2010 adopted the Downtown Centre Vision Plan, and then in 2016 the Lot A was purchased at 6671 Wadhams Way by the District of Sooke, and then in 2017 Lot A was zoned P2 for community facility, and then we get up to now when we've been hired to do this charrette to come out with a plan for council on how to move forward with Lot A. For planning context, the Lot A itself is referred specifically in the official community plan under economic development for consideration of a college school, which was timely with Royal Roads here this evening, residential, commercial, mixed-use development, or seniors housing on the vacant land adjacent to Evergreen Mall as it's described in the OCP. And then in the 2009 Town Centre Plan, they envisioned townhouse, apartments, open space, including affordable housing for a mix of different income levels and age groups to live in the town centre. Page 15 of the Town Centre Plan has land use goals for retail, considering development of the vacant site again. And page 19 as well has it for community uses or schools. So it's mentioned a few times with a few different visions that we're trying to kind of capture with throughout this charrette, and that were consistent with the feedback we heard in the charrette. So for community uses and values, I thought I would touch on a few of these things. The first two that I have up on the board here, coming from the soon-to-be updated Districts of Sooke strategic plan for long-term thinking, community vibrancy, enhancing quality of life, sense of place, and community pride. And then specifically the Lot A focus is fostering community identity, vitality, and safety, with the top objectives noted that Lot A would be a community hub. And then lastly, specific to Lot A, and I think reflecting on a lot of the feedback that we got during our open house and our public comment, is the environmental stewardship, which I've added at the end there. And specific to Lot A, I think that one of the reoccurring themes that came out from stakeholders was the suggestion that Lot A should be a real showcase of some of those smart growth principles and objectives, the town centre plan, and just overall green development and design, and that we want to feature in the District of Sooke. So to recap on the Lot A process, we developed, and I'm really proud of the work that we did here in a fulsome community engagement. Beginning in August of 2018, should be September, I think, but basically throughout that time we began the one-on-one meetings, members of councils, community groups, and others. We also launched the www.sookelota.com website as a way to engage with the public and provide an opportunity for those who might be too busy to attend an open house to still come online, learn about the project, and also provide feedback and register for notifications. I also went out and door knocked my immediate neighbors, or the immediate neighbors to the property, I should say. I did not think of this when I was going out. It was getting probably late into November before the open house, and then Ms. Campbell texted me, "You probably should have some bear spray with you," and I did not think of that when I was out there, because that's not an issue in my community, and so I did. That was a gulp. Better bring that next time. And anyway, we survived. And then following the door knocking and engagement with the neighbors, we had the formal charrette workshop, which was December 6th and 8th, where we went through the visioning, context, community needs, bubble diagram, where we began to lay out how we address and where we would find those community items, and then of course went into design elements and landscaping. December 7th, we held a public open house, a drop-in for neighbors, community members, and anyone else interested. That open house was advertised in the Sooke Pocket News and Sooke News Mirror, and as well to the immediate neighbors. And it was also a time during that open house to review some of those design elements that were talked about during the workshop. We then presented our initial feedback and design at the January 21st Committee of the Whole meeting, and then that presented an action item to go to the February open house, which I'll report on in a second. I just want to do a high-level recap of kind of the general themes and the key feedback that we've received. Basically, one was being that we need to address affordable housing in the District of Sooke. I know there's been a lot of work with BC Housing recently in that file, and this presents an opportunity to forward that. Community gathering space being critical, with the regional library and providing some boardroom and meeting space. It was noted that being a volunteer community, Sooke, there's a desire and a need for some of that general community meeting space and outdoor space as well. That currently a lot of outdoor gathering happens in parking lots, and wouldn't it be great if there was a designated kind of community plaza or space? And that was a reoccurring theme and favorable comment that occurred throughout the process. Any development that occurred on site should have ample green space and respects the surrounding area, and if there is planting and landscaping, that it is Indigenous, and also addresses some of the drainage concerns from the neighbors in the area with the groundwater. Transit routes along the area, which was addressed during the charrette. We actually had a representative from BC Transit there who was quite keen on the idea of tying in the Lot A with property and Wadham's Way with the emerging transit routes in and out of Sooke and around locally. And generally, the other thing I think that's important to point out, just for your interest, as the district kind of starts to contemplate an update in the official community plan, is the one thing that we found consistently, and I think it's also echoed in the report that you have before you, is the real general support for the town centre plan, which I think is really positive. It means that you have a good plan, and it still has a lot of elements in it and principles in it that were genuinely bought into and supported by the community. We kind of teased out some alternatives throughout the process and allowed for people to give feedback, and people would generally go back to the town center plan on a lot of those key items. And I actually also, on that note, I also tested it with Mr. Carlson, who works in Colwood now. I showed him the concept that we were working with, who was the person who was the lead consultant on that town center plan, and he concurred with kind of the direction that we were going. And then I think the other thing with those guidelines, and it actually reminds me of the commentary that was had earlier in this meeting about the West Coast Road Sidewalk addition, is the fact that the idea of showcasing those town center guidelines and plans in real development that's occurring, and the fact that this property could pose itself as an opportunity to basically demonstrate to the community, and especially the development and investment community, what a good development looks like when it is encouraging those town center design plans. And then I will go quickly to the feedback that we received at the February 26th open meeting. On land use, we honed in on some of the land uses that would be recommended to the site. These land uses were developed and further refined to develop the the draft zoning bylaw for a comprehensive zone that you will see in Appendix F of the report. As far as zoning options goes, when it comes to how land use is handled, we showed 4 options: rezoning the entire property for community center, or rezoning the entire property into a comprehensive zone, or there was the idea of splitting it into P2, which is the existing zone, which would be entirely complementary of the plaza and library portion of the lands, and then rezoning the other half into a commercial town center zone. Or the other idea was to leave it the same, which was also an option, which would be to keep it at P2. And if you did that, obviously, you could definitely go ahead and build a library in a community plaza, but you wouldn't be able to have any housing or any of the other items on the property in the current zoning because they're not permissive uses. And then the other one was public amenity, reviewed and affirmed at that point the request from the public for things like art walks, outdoor market space, playgrounds, green landscaping, and other landscaping tools that were supported by the general public. And then design, once again, those were just reaffirming or understanding the direction to go with the town center as a generally supported plan. So now we're just going to go into really quickly a summary of the items that you have in the schedule before you. I think it's important to note at this point that the majority of these items as key milestones will also include community feedback. So I don't want members of the public to think that, once council adopts this, it's basically, staff go off and execute, and there's never a chance for any voices to be heard or anything like that. There's obviously, and I'll note a few in here, but there's going to be a number of key opportunities where the public would get a chance to provide feedback on more detailed designs. This is meant to be conceptual as a plan. So in the short term, milestone 1 would be what we would do tonight or in the near future, where basically we say to staff, yeah, you can go ahead and move on to milestone 2 and the future work on the site. Milestone 2 would be the due diligence that would go into any work before a property would be subdivided or rezoned, specifically working with Bartlett, who did the arborist report on the property, to determine how the plaza space and other spaces can incorporate their findings with their arborist report, working with a civil engineer to understand the initial frontage improvements along Wadhams, working with the library to incorporate what they're planning with their civil space, bus stop space, and also how the property can be accessed as that kind of high street or internal road that would then move on to the Evergreen Mall or coordinate with the Evergreen Mall. And then the other thing was the idea of a rainwater management plan and having a biologist look at the property. I know it's, and she's not here, but Councillor Parkinson raised both the arborist and the rainwater management biologist report as a critical item, and address that as something that should be reviewed early on. And so we've worked to cover that. And then likely what would happen, or what we would anticipate happening, would be at milestone 3 and 4, when you're going into the survey and the rezoning of the site. At that time, when that comes forward to council, that would be when these items from staff would come forward to council as well. And once again, the public would have input, and there'd be a chance for council to critically think about that and review those items. Milestone 3, going to the rezoning portion, which I've got here as shown here as a diagram. What we did was, following the open house, considering the feedback that we got from the public, we actually combined option 1 and option 3 as presented, or sorry, option 2 and option 3 as presented at the open house. So we basically said you could leave the green portion of the property, or we call it P2, the portion with the library and the plaza space there as P2, because it would all be allowable within that current zone. But then the other portion, that was where we said you could adopt the CD zone that we've drafted in figure F on the report. So that would then lend itself to the other uses that we've talked about, such as mixed use, the senior center, healthcare, and those other uses that are have been identified as from the community as being important for this property. And then once again, this is just within that community center zone. We've got items like, art gallery was talked about, the potential for apartment or mixed use housing, commercial exhibits, some sort of school, whether it's private or public, country market, daycare, and those kind of things have all been adopted for this site to make it feasible.
Yep, Councillor McMath has a question.
Just in regards to rezoning, so I have my notes here. So right now, the whole property is zoned P2.
Correct.
And that allows institutional use. Intuitional use. Sorry. Institutional use, can't talk. So the definition in the Sooke bylaw says it's that use means a facility established to serve a social, recreational, educational, or other purpose, and includes, but is not limited to arena, armory, cemetery, college, community care center, community hall, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not limited to those buildings. So when you say that housing or that type of building couldn't be created there, I don't know if that's completely accurate.
I defer to staff on that one because they know their zoning bylaw better than I do.
Through your worship, thank you, Councillor McMath. Good point. Housing wouldn't be permitted there. Residential uses, you have to look at the purpose and intent statement too of the zone. So institutional uses like library, schools that are public type of schools, yes, could go there. Religious assembly, park spaces, but like
Co-op
a commercial
housing,
school.
Senior living?
No, residential housing is not a listed use. There's not a single P2 zone in the district that has housing or anything beyond really park or a park-related facility or rec facility, because residential uses are not permitted in that zone.
But it doesn't say that, though. That's where I'm like a little bit confused, because it's not limited to what's defined in the list. And there's no blanket statement that says residential is not permitted.
By it not being a listed use in the P2, it's not permitted. And
But
it's not the intent of a public institutional zone for there to be residential uses.
But right here it says it's not limited to the list. So you saying that because it's not in the list, it's not included is...
I guess through your worship, you could say then anything can go there if we went by that specific definition that it's not limited to. It's meant to be, it's not limited to these specific institutional uses. There may be other things that we haven't listed in that definition but still meet institutional by general definition.
Which is how I read it, that anything could go there as long as it serves a social, recreational, educational, or public purpose, which could be residential housing.
I think staff would have a hard time defending that. And then if we applied that on this site, we would have to apply that on all P2 zones throughout the district and assume that housing can go on all of those spaces as well where it wasn't intended.
I think that this project is a bit bigger scope compared to the other properties that are out there. Like, this is in the community hub. Clearly this entire project is centered around the community. So
I guess is the problem not wanting to do a rezoning process?
I'm just curious, like, why are we rezoning?
So I guess two things on that would be, one, the direction to go through rezoning would be contemplated as it is included here as a future milestone.
Yeah.
So this debate once again, the discussion tonight is more on the concept of the charrette itself, and then the decision to go through with the staff report that would basically present these as options would be debated by council based on its merits, just like any other rezoning in the community at a future time. One of the reasons why I think that there's value in doing this kind of split zone, and one of the reasons why it was recommended was because we heard clearly that we didn't want to go to a blanket commercial downtown zone, and we didn't want to make it necessarily P2, where, for instance, and another challenge with doing I think the crux of the challenge with this in the town center and the town center plan is that P2 also limits you to 2 stories. It would be economically it's not feasible to do affordable or any kind of housing in a mixed use setting in a 2-story building. And so what the purpose of the split zone is the way I see it, and the reason for it being recommended was the feedback we received from the public was that this provides a very clear kind of expectation around what portion of the land would be library and park space or plaza space, and what part of the property would be current, mid, and future term development space. And so and then the reason why we went with a CD comprehensive development zone, a customized zone for the property instead of a blanket commercial zone, was just to really kind of put a fine point on that and really help hone in what the public's expectations for that site would and wouldn't be, as Ms. Campbell has pointed out, being that zoning is permissive. So if it's not listed there, it's a no-go unless somebody applies for a rezoning.
Right, so like the benefit of rezoning is just to build higher than 2 stories. That's the gist.
And
because like the split zoning, like you can still shape it however you like. So the benefit of having the zoning change would be to go over 2 stories.
And to have a mix of uses, either in the same building or in multiple buildings on the site.
And you couldn't do mixed uses with a P2 zone?
No.
Okay,
just to mix within the institutional. So the zone provides for community facilities within the District of Sooke, limited to those permitted uses specifically listed, and institutional's intent is not housing and, like, say, larger retail, restaurants, that kind of thing, those commercial type uses. Okay. Through the charrette, people pointed out the benefit of, say, for a seniors facility or youth drop-in center, having like a small coffee shop on the corner to help serve both the library and the users of that site, or having some office space on a second floor and housing above. Mm-hmm. You can't do that in the P2. It's not the intent of that zone.
Okay, but we'll cross that. Like, I don't want to initiate rezoning at this stage. Like, I'm comfortable with that being a milestone that we would work towards. Yeah. But I think that, like, we've solidified where the law, and I recognize your hand, Councillor Beddoes. I'll get to you in a second. That I think we need to deal with, like, accept the report and then, look at forming a committee to get into more of the details of where things are going to go, and then the rezoning will follow. I don't think it's appropriate to initiate any rezoning, because the only thing we know for sure is that the library is going to go in one corner, and that's totally fine at this stage.
Yeah, so like, as if I was a member of the public and I had like never seen this before, if I saw that, like, your list, I know, like we say right now, like, this is in theory, this is in practice, but in bullet point 3 is completing rezoning. So it kind of presents a little bit like it's predetermined. And then my other question was, when we had the boards here upstairs, my only comment was that, I can see it from here, there's tiny check marks here, tiny like subtraction ones, and then there's sort of like big X's. Mm-hmm. And so it can be interpreted that it's like swaying to push a different way. So then this is so minute. But my only recommendation would be that it's all the same font or whatever that thing is, because the comments have been made that it's pushing towards a specific option based off like the graphic choices that were used.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Beddoes, then Bateman.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I have a problem with this zoning. Let's see what shakes out of this plan.
Yeah.
There's no point going ahead and chopping this in half, and that sends a message that's all that's there. Maybe when it comes to the P2 zone or even the other zone, maybe it only ends up to be a quarter of that we need to be in that zoning. I think we just best wait to see what comes out of it, because some of this stuff isn't going to happen for years.
Yeah, and part of the reason where what I recall it stayed with P2 is that it would be a way for us to also check in with the community as we develop the property. Like, there's the public hearings, an opportunity to talk about what we're doing and to get their input on it. So that's where I'm comfortable with it staying as P2, because the only thing that is happening is the library, and they're still working down that process. We need to then determine the rest and find the funding and do all of that. So that'll come in time, and then, you know, this gives us something to target for sure. But I don't want to progress a rezoning.
Yeah,
it's just too early to even to do that. I think we need to build some relations first. Councillor Bateman?
Well, I'd agree with all that. I think it needs noting that the community is a little gun-shy around the rezoning of Lot A. The attempt was made back, initially, council, when they were rezoning from large lot residential back in April 2017, wanted to move it to town center mixed use, and that generated a lot of kickback from particularly people on the south side of the town center, where they were hoping and intending that the town center plan would focus on development of their particular section of town. This draft comprehensive development, what is this called? Community Hub and Comprehensive Development Zone, is radically different from the town center mixed use that was being proposed back in 2017. That CTC zone includes things like grocery stores, all sorts of things which would be commercially competing with other parts of town. So anyway, this is all something to discuss when we get to the next stage, but tonight.
Yeah. Councillor St. Pierre?
I was just wondering if you were actually finished your presentation, because I don't think you are.
Oh, no, I'm not.
All right.
No, we'll need to move along.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll move along. Just to kind of, and I would say that I'll leave this caveat for both this section and as we go into future sections too, is that as was mentioned, there's with any zoning, whether it's a council rezoning it or a member of the public, you've got a legislative mandate that you do have to receive public feedback, and obviously a lot more consideration will be given. But Councillor Bateman, to your point, the reason behind doing that CD zone and doing it very different was in acknowledging that history with the rezoning on the property and trying to ensure that we kind of find a happy middle where it's workable and there are opportunities for realistic partnerships that then can deliver additional funding or opportunity for things like a drop-in center or Lions Hall or whatever it ends up being there, but also at the same time it does put enough of a box around it for the general public that they know they're not going to have a large retail center or something that would then be competing with the private sector. So I'll leave it there, and like I said, we're happy to, this is something that will evolve just like this map. Things will evolve over time through additional feedback. So we can move now to that's just a concept subdivision plan. It's essentially along the same lines, and as Mayor Tait mentioned, that Lot 4, for instance, because that was a reserved kind of piece of property that could be held for the future, that too could be P2 until a future discussion is had, right? So there's opportunity and flexibility there within the current plan. Just to go to midterm, the idea here would be following community feedback at the while the library is being delivered, and during the zoning discussion that comes out would be then to basically put either an RFP or ROI forward to either the private, public, not-for-profit sector with respect to development of the that one corner property shown here as Lot 2 in the subdivision plan. With respect to this, obviously we'd be following the town center plan and working with the concept that we've generated for the space, and I think it's one of the things that I think is important here. And when we talk about the idea of forming a committee or kind of a working group, is to check back in with both the planning document that we've provided here today and the community in general, and determine what those really key essential items are that you'd like to see in here, and then leaving the rest open to the application process to see what kind of creativity comes out of whether it's a not-for-profit housing provider or somebody else in the private sector, what have you, to come up with an idea that kind of addresses some of the needs that the district has for this property. And I really think it is neat when you do these projects. My recommendation here would be that when you do go out to expressions of interest, to leave it open-ended and let people be creative in how they deliver these items for you and see what comes from it. And then just to move on, in the long-term area, and then I've got just a quick, I don't want to, do you want to, actually, I'll step and answer questions if you, yeah. You've seen the plan before, so I won't, yeah, exactly, yeah, so he'll, yeah, exactly, but you've seen this all before. And then the long term, once again, that's why we have that land bank land there. That was another thing that we heard from the public was they like the idea of having a piece of land there that can integrate with the Evergreen Mall differently as that property develops in the future and perhaps adapts to the town center plan as vision for that whole site, and also just keeping that bank land for a long-term holding for the municipality that can be developed out in the future or held for community purpose if there's suddenly interest for a public campus or a hospital or whatever kind of other, or clinic or whatever the need of the future council might be. It would kind of be your legacy item moving forward on the property. So I have gone on now very long, so I will anyway. So here's the recommendations for it. Basically endorsing the concept, which gives staff the ability to move forward on those that initial milestone. Working with the staff to begin the schedule, and then, as was suggested, the possibility of a working group, and then often reviewing the purpose of Lot A as a strategic priority to make sure that there are the funds and resources necessary to help execute. So I will leave it there. If you have any other questions, please don't hesitate.
No, that's great. I really appreciate all the work that you've done, and just the variety of how you've had the different charrettes and the interactions and walking on the site and all of that. So thank you very much. Councillor St. Pierre.
Based on the charrettes results and just the input from the public, we seem to have a lot of interest in having a plaza. That's one of the things that just seems to be universally accepted. And I noticed that you had a large number of grant opportunities associated with developing the plaza. In terms of your phased approach, when would we maybe want to see about, for example, hiring a grant writer to attack all of these grant writing opportunities or something along those lines, assuming that we don't want to actually lay that all on staff or that we want to manage our resources in that way? When would that come in?
I would probably, as far as capacity of staff goes to process grants, I would leave that to them. But obviously with after the second milestone, let's call it, where the stormwater management piece is done with the biologist and everything. Diligence. I think, after the due diligence process, I think there is going to be one opportunity where you're going to have a window, and then the following opportunity be once you've consulted with a landscape architect. And in my experience, the grants are typically associated with having some sort of planned or working drawing associated with it, and so the more it gets developed, the better your likelihood is. But I don't know if staff have an additional comment on that as well.
Through your worship to Councillor St. Pierre, we also have noted, because we're working on the Parks and Trails Master Plan, that as it's publicly owned land and there's heavy interest in having a public park-like space here, that be covered in that plan and discussed. And as it is in your draft strategic plan as a priority, it makes sense to connect it there. So if that's where it ends up, and we then do our DCC bylaws and we include that as a part of a DCC project, if it is still a priority of council, future budgets, ideally there'd be something set aside as well throughout that process. So DCCs, if this is a long-term, if it's an immediate thing that council wants to see, then of course obviously grant funding through FCC funding and other opportunities are available, and as they come up between myself and the head of Parks and Environment, we would try to take advantage of those.
Yeah, and I think just further to that, we're making progress so that we can be ready for those grants as they come. It would make sense if there's an opportunity when the library breaks ground that we, breaks ground. No, breaks ground, that we do that section at the same time. So we are moving in preparedness for that at the moment. So that's where, we'll be alerted to new initiatives as they come available.
I'm just very interested, given that this seems to be low-hanging fruit and moving it as quickly as possible. The other question that I had was, actually a few recommendations and a question. Using the undeveloped space as an interim community garden, either for education on that sort of thing, or for actual food production, because if we're land banking, we might as well use it for something. And if we're right next to a library and so on and so forth, it seems like a good place to have workshops. Also, there's still the option, or we still have the opportunity to work in conjunction with the provincial government on some form of community center that would have daycare spaces. So I'm hoping that we can move as quickly as possible towards seeing whether or not we can do something with that.
Yeah.
I think that was it. Thank you.
Okay, so there's one addition I'd like to add to the recommendation. We have one here, and that is that Council endorse the Latte Charrette concept plan as attached and direct staff to begin to execute the proposed Latte schedule. I would also like to add, and that Council direct staff to bring the terms of reference for the Community Center Committee to an upcoming COW meeting for discussion. So we had a Community Center Advisory Committee in the past, so a good place to start is to bring those terms of references forward, see what adjustments we need to make to them, and then they can, because when they provided their report to Council, this land was not held by Council. So things have changed, and that plan needs to be updated, and there is a need to start moving forward on some community spaces and to start planning out how that can be, and to reach out. We have one of the Lions still with us in this evening. Your two comrades had left, but it's important that we start having that engagement. So I think having the terms of reference and determining membership, and then they can start, okay, now which sections do we start advancing, and how do we plan, and who is at the table, and what are we doing, and how are we going about it. And then they can also tackle that piece about, okay, this quadrant isn't going to be used. Is there a way to turn it into a garden for X time? So that should all come that would be something that the committee could begin to work through. There was tremendous work done. It was just, that needs to all be picked up now. So I think it's a good time for that. Councillor St. Pierre, then Bateman.
Just something very quick. I noticed specifically with regards to working committee that you included EMCS staff and student. I would suggest student as opposed to necessarily staff, because we really need a youth component.
That'll be in the terms of reference of our committee.
But if it's going to come, if any of that material is going to come forward from these folk, I wanted to.
It would come from our staff. We'll start with our previous terms of reference that we had, because that's live, and then we can add those.
All right. I would also like, ideally, a parent that has a child to have some input.
Yeah, like when we get the terms of reference, we can discuss that together, and have that conversation, because we don't have those terms. They may already be identified, and that'll be up to Council to make that determination. So can we add that, please, to the recommendation, and that Council direct staff to bring the terms of reference for the previous Community Center Advisory Committee to an upcoming Committee of the Whole or regular Council meeting for discussion?
We have, that'll be done as a separate motion.
Okay.
And we'll just do this one on its own, because it's a different directive to a different staff member or staff component, and then the other one is for different staff, just so that they keep the resolutions clear, so they're assigned to appropriate departments.
Okay, whatever. So we'll start with the first one then. I'm just not going to drop off on the second. Okay, that Council endorse the Latte Charrette concept plan is attached, and that Council direct staff to begin execution of the proposed Latte schedule. Moved by Councillor McMath, seconded by Councillor Bateman. Anything further? All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. And then the next one is that council directs staff to bring the existing terms of reference for the Community Center Advisory Committee and their final report to the next regular council meeting or committee of the whole, whichever comes first, regular council meeting, for discussion. Okay, moved by Councillor Bateman, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. And then, we can look at those and update them. Sound good? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. So, thank you so much for all of your work.
Mayor Tait, I was
What?
on the speaker's queue.
Oh, my goodness, and I have missed you. Oh, no.
Sorry,
Councillor
I promised to
Bateman.
keep this under an hour. But I've been a fan of the community's planning documents for a while now. We have a really great current Parks and Trails plan. We have a remarkably good Transportation Master Plan, Town Center Plan, and here this is an addition to these planning documents. I think the key thing as we move forward is that we actually keep reading them and revisiting them and following. There's such a good series, a good schedule, short, medium, and longer term, these milestones. And you really appreciation to you too for what you've come up with here, and to Ms. Campbell for steering you forward, and everyone who participated. So thank you. Okay.
Yep, so that will join our suite of documents.
Yes, indeed.
Yes. So now that what would be helpful, just a technical question or ask of staff is, because this, maybe it's okay. I was just looking if I could have a PDF of just the actual Lot A report so that I can save it in but it's probably okay if I have the staff report attached to it, so never mind. Answer my own question there. But it's always just getting this to work. Never mind, I'll figure it out. Just can't break it up. It's good. Good. Thank you. Thank you very much, gentlemen, and drive back safely, and thank you very much for your work. Okay. Child care needs assessment. So just to follow up, so at our last meeting, we received a delegation and we had asked for a report to come. So then it's not on tonight, so we will get that then at the June 10th meeting. I think that was the resolution on adding the RU4 and group child care. So
Yes, Your Worship,
okay.
We're working on that to come to the June 10th to address that request.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. So on to the child care needs assessment.
Thank you.
Or Ms. Campbell.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I have no presentation for this. That's a very brief report. We put out the proposal, the RFP, for a little over a month, and we received one response, but in fact we were quite fortunate. It was a great response, and they meet all of the requirements. It's from City Spaces. They meet all the needs of the grant requirements, but also the additional requests that we had included based on our own interests and some of the things we've heard from council. They have a proven track record, have produced similar documents in the past, so we wish to award the contract and enter into an agreement, but we first need to ask for a little over $5,000 to come from the operating surplus to add to our overall $25,000 budget. We do have a grant for $25,000, but the bid came in a little bit over. There was some negotiating back and forth. We cut back a little bit on some of the assessment of our current bylaws. They were under the impression it would take much longer than it did, so we were able to save a couple $1,000s. But beyond that, I'd be hesitant to cut anything more from the scope because I don't want to lose the quality of the product that we could get.
We also have to meet the criteria of the grant that we got. So
absolutely.
We run into that as well. Okay. All right, so there's a recommendation that council directs staff to use $5,072 from operating surplus for the child care needs assessment, and that council directs staff to enter a general service agreement for a child care needs assessment with City Spaces for $30,072. Moved by Councillor McMath, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Any questions? This is a really pressing, so I'm really glad that we got the grant because just for families and growing, I'll just add that I think the Machosen Montessori School is full with a wait list. So that's some feedback that I've heard from parents that are planning out their preschool and what next space and where do you look space. So it's coming. right now, and I was told that I should already be enrolling my child in the school of my preference and finding before and after daycare now, and that's 2 and 3 years away. So, oh my, I don't know that you can take wait lists that long out in advance. I don't think so. Anyway, it's just exactly. I'm like, man, I can't. But it's a very important piece here. So I'm really glad that we're working on this together. Okay, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. Housing needs assessment. So here's another one that we had earlier and went out, and we're back. Ms. Campbell.
Through your worship, so I'm doing this one on behalf of Tanisha. She was managing that RFP, did a great job. We received 6 proposals for this one, all actually quite impressive. So there was quite a bit of analysis and reading through, but there was a unanimous consensus amongst the staff that reviewed them that Urbanics was the best fit. They also meet all of the requirements and that we've set out in the RFP. And when the RFP was originally written, the province hadn't listed their guidelines, and so since it still meets their guidelines and then some, because we kind of went into a little more detail. Also worth noting, it is slightly more than the budget, so that's why we have that additional ask in our recommendations. But we have had some preliminary discussions with Urbanics about should we get the additional funding for the $20,000 grant that's available, some other additional things we could fit into that scope, and one of them being an economic assessment of Sooke and how this all plays in. We think that could be really valuable for some baseline work for the OCP. So we're excited about that, and we're ready to press send on the grant application if you approve us applying.
Yeah, no, I think it's important that we apply for that, and if we can get that economic data, that would be very useful, I think, just to have our own local stats and data that we're not all glommed into other places is really important now as we're planning ahead. So that's great, and I'm glad you've identified this grant. Okay, questions? Councillor Bateman?
Yeah, I'm just curious. I know it's for the consultancy services at the moment, it's a bit of a buyer's market, right? In that I think many municipalities in BC are seeking these reports, housing needs and child care. So great that we got 1 for the child care and 6 for this. Do you find that perhaps the prices are going up because it is a buyer's market?
It's hard to nail down exactly why and exactly if they actually are going up that much. I mean, part of it is the complexity of the studies that are now being requested, because some of them are mandated legislatively, like a housing needs assessment. That's something we'll be required to do, and no doubt consultants are aware of that. But every community is asking for different levels of complexity, and every consultant has their area of expertise. So, yeah.
Okay, can we move this in a block? Yes, okay. So, moving the recommendation as a block, that Council directs staff to enter a general service agreement for a housing needs report with Urbanics Consultants Limited for $42,900. That Council directs staff to apply to the UBCM Housing Needs Report Program for a grant of up to $20,000 for the purposes of conducting a housing needs report, and that Council directs staff to transfer $7,900 from the Housing Reserve Fund Establishment Bylaw 2006 should the district not be successful in obtaining the grant. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Bateman. Anything on the motion? None. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. And just an ask that let us know if we're successful with the grant. Perfect. Okay, we've done our RCMP report. Cannabis production information update.
Your Worship, so there's quite an extensive... Sorry. I asked Nicholas to not have to stay and put in all that overtime to wait till the end of the agenda, but we basically provided this for you so you have it well in enough time before the June 10th meeting. So if you do have any questions or things you'd like us to address when we do come forward on the June 10th, this would be the opportune time to point that out and let us address it at that meeting.
Councillor St. Pierre?
Move to accept the report.
Move to accept the report. Well, actually, it's more, and that the report be forwarded to the regular meeting of council June 10th for discussion in committee of the whole. Okay.
That too.
Separate? Okay. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Beddoes. The only, I found what I liked about it was just giving the economic context, the employment, the salary range, what that looks like. I would be interested to know, like, to work there, what sort of training or education, like, are because we've heard a bit about some of the like, is it a background in horticulture? Like, what do you need to do to get qualified to work there? And then what comes over time in terms of education opportunities? That might be something of interest to our fourth retail location that is looking at a college element there, perhaps. And also what always comes up from people is, what do they smell when they walk up to this? And I know that that was one thing that was on my mind when we were coordinating for the tour, is, do you actually smell something? Like, how is it venting? What do you smell, right? And so those sorts of things. And that's difficult to know in a report. You actually have to know on site because it's a smell and it's noise. And then I think that's what I had. It was a great report. I love all the information in here, and that's very interesting. And also, just the other one is the change from the ALC about how, and I forgot the article at home, that cannabis cultivation production is now an accepted use on the ALR lands. So there was a concern that because that change was made, that some local governments now have to make changes to existing bylaws and are scrambling to do that. So that would be something I would like to know, what that change, what is it impacting for us? Or is it just the case it's a farm use, and, like, is that fine? Are we fine with that? Or not, I don't know. Like, that's a change that happened that it would be good to actually nail down what that looks like. Councillor St. Pierre.
Just a further question, through your worship. Is there going to be another opportunity for a tour of the production facility?
Through your worship, we actually were just speaking to Mr. Liang today. He's just out of the hospital, so he's hoping that even by Friday, but we'd like to kind of give him a little time to recoup. So maybe we're going to pick a date for next week, and hopefully that there's a date in there that works for all of council. And just to mention, Madam Mayor, you mentioned going on the tour and getting a sense of smell. This is not an operating facility yet. Otherwise, we wouldn't be allowed to tour it. He has within 30 days so we were trying to get in the tour before he gets his approvals, because then it's like shut down, only people with high level security clearance. So what he will do is walk up. Sorry, we won't ever be able to walk through when it's operating, but what he'll do, and I myself and one of the other planners has walked through before, and he'll show us what activities will be happening where, and how the security works, and his lessons learned and experiences through the different levels of government, and how the business park actually is working as a logistics hub. Yeah, so that's the purpose of that tour, and we do want to have that with you before the June 10th meeting.
Okay, so in an ideal, perfect world for myself, because it's all about me, no it isn't, if you could potentially look at the June the 6th in the afternoon or June the 7th in the morning, that would be great. But I know it'll depend on what is available there and everything else. But just because I'm away on vacation for the first few days, I don't get back till Wednesday night. So Thursday after, I have to speak at a conference here in the morning. So if like after 12 would be great, because I'd like to be at that event locally here. For
Your worship, those are the actual days we were looking at as well, because I'm away from Monday to Wednesday, and I feel I should be there. On another note, next week from Monday to Wednesday. I'll be in Calgary at a cannabis mini conference, mostly focused on edibles. So I'm hoping to bring back some interesting information in our Lunch and Learn that Tanisha and I are going to be hosting June 10, 11th. So you are all invited. So hopefully,
edibles into a.
We won't be bringing edibles, but we'll be speaking about that along with some of the other conferences we've attended. So hopefully, some of you can be there to hear some of that.
That'd be great. Thank you, Ms. Campbell. And I'll be speaking at the FCM on the cannabis panel. So I know that Mr. Diebler had to leave, but I just want to thank him for his work with some of the information. And UBCM staff also took the two and merged them together so that I have that PowerPoint. It's been sent off. It's being translated now for French, and looking forward to that. So it's just talking about how municipalities are adapting, how Sooke is adapting from here's what happened federally, provincially, and then locally, and then what's next. So if there's anything, you're there. Okay, you're after my panel. Okay, got it. But if you think of anything like here's a challenge, please send it to me because it would be a good opportunity to share that. Okay. All right, so I think we've moved and seconded that. Did we call the question? Nope. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried unanimously. So, correspondence. Lots and lots.
It'll be quick. Keep it quick.
Okay, just let me get to it because... Yeah, it's just, I can't, if you tell me the date, it doesn't, it's just like a long PDF. So I'm just going to scroll through and read out the subjects and then alert me if there's anything there, okay? So we got a nice email from Kidsport with a letter. We have one from Dangerous Dog Appeal. Okay.
So they're asking for financial support. I don't know if we can afford it, but they do seem to be bringing up an issue around potential liabilities with dangerous dogs that we've been exposed to due to a decision made at a different level of court. So do we want to where should we send this to be dealt with?
Well, our bylaw officer works with CRD Animal Control on dangerous dogs.
So this is more a CRD thing and we shouldn't necessarily worry about it?
It's we contract this to the CRD.
Awesome. That's
yeah, but our bylaw officer will also receive reports and deal with them appropriately.
No, that's it.
Okay. Knox Center sent us a nice letter. That was exciting to see that come to light. We have something from the University of BC.
Got something on that?
Okay, Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, I'd like to just suggest we forward that to Searchin.
This is the survey. Yes, that's correct. So do we need that in a resolution that we, send the letter, if we could, that council directs staff to send the letter to the Sooke Region Community Health Initiative for their records,
For action.
For action.
Because there's
for their consideration.
Consideration.
Yes.
Friendly amendment, perhaps?
Okay, friendly amendment with the microphone on.
There was a request in the letter to put this in the Sooke newsletter, in our district newsletter if we have one.
Okay, so, one day we'll have one, but it won't be available ready in time.
Okay.
But if they have a website, maybe we can tweet it out. We can tweet something.
Whatever we're using right now to get the message out to the public about goings on.
So forward, and for the district to tweet out the link to the survey.
Sure.
That'll be the amendment. So that was moved by Councillor Bateman, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Anything further? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. And of course, we'll all fill it out too. Right. Okay, we have a letter from School District 62, or let me see. Yes, that's about setting up a meeting, so that will be great, and it would be good to look to coordinate something. So perhaps council can direct staff to connect with SD62 about a joint meeting. Moved by Councillor Bateman,
and Your
seconded
Worship,
by Councillor
just
St.
if I might, this has already been in the works.
Oh, is it?
Yes, it is.
Well, what if we didn't want to meet?
Then we wouldn't.
All right. No, that's great. Thank you. So we don't need to worry about that motion because it's happening. So that's great because we have talked about that. Okay, our next one is about pollution here. Councillor St. Pierre.
I would suggest we kick this one to the Climate Action Committee.
Okay, for their discussions. Okay, so council directs staff to send the email from Jean Simons to the Climate Action Committee for their consideration, discussion. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre and seconded by Councillor McMath. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. Oh, pardon me.
No, I just want to throw an opposition here for the fun. No, I'm okay.
All right.
Get punchy. I love cutting my mouth.
We have a note from CRD from Patrick Gale, so we'll have more on that when we have the delegation, but it was good to see his letter there. Transition Sooke has invited us to an event. I'll need to advise that I'm away. Councillor Bateman?
Yeah, there's a secondary, there's the event on Tuesday, June 4th, but on Thursday morning, June 6th, we're touring the craft grow-op in the afternoon, I think. But in the morning, Sooke Council and staff is invited to meet with Mr. Dar, who is a highly reputable and internationally known climate reporter, and it might be useful. We refer to this to the Climate Change Action Committee, but he's not in town too often. He's from Port Townsend. So that's an opportunity and an open invite for people to gather, and I think 10:30 was the time being suggested.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, would we want to host him here in your office, possibly?
Yep, so we can do that. I'm just not certain if I will be there, but you're more than welcome to use the space.
Okay.
Okay?
I think I'll be there, and perhaps...
So can I just task this to Councillor Bateman? Can you connect and email out and RSVP and just do that and make that happen, and just we'll just let staff know that we will be using my office that day for this intent, at least at the morning.
And staff is welcome as well, of course.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. We have a letter here from Mr. Sheldon, so that's all in relation to the Farmlands Trust that we're still weighing and considering. We have feedback from Mr. Dybel on the plastic bag ban, and that's moving. That'll have a public hearing because it's a new bylaw, so we can maybe have that go there. Access Awareness Day campaign, and we got the printout as well. Built Green June 5th Day. Okay, go ahead.
I don't suggest we actually follow up on this. I do actually think we should be using the STEP program and move forward with that. But using a registered trademark, I'm not really sure. I don't have enough information about this that I would want to pursue, although I think we really do need to be considering what we want to do with STEP. So anyway.
Yep, so STEP is coming at a later time. And what we're going to look to do there, and I agree. I'm not. Thank you for the idea, Councillor McMath.
I was going to say that there's the report that's coming forward, and when we were talking about it at that time, I'd asked if this was going to be included with it. So maybe we'll, yeah. So maybe we'll touch on it.
Okay.
Just quickly, as a reminder that we did declare Built Green Day last year at this time, so maybe once is enough.
Well, I'd like to see more Built Green. I think as we have some things to showcase, it would be like, here are some things that have happened, would tie in a bit more. At that time, we had Harborside Co-housing had broken ground, ribbon cutting. Like, there was things that we could actually identify and point to. It's a bit stale right now. And then we received the petition here. So that was great to receive that, and as well as a letter. Yeah, I'm just, so we have a letter and we have the petition. And was there something at the... Okay, and then feedback on our, that was just our resolution that passed and is going to the UBCM.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Just regarding the Montessori application,
Yes.
I think staff will be bringing back something for us at the next council meeting, I believe.
Yep, June the 10th.
Yes, okay, that's good to know. Thank
Yeah,
you.
and then we have this as well. So maybe this should go. Can that just be referenced perhaps in the staff report? Petition was received for X. I don't think this needs to form the materials, but just a summary of it would be good, and maybe just the letter. I don't think we need all the others because it's already on record now. Councillor St. Pierre?
This is with regards to the Montessori as well, but I'm just curious if I can, through your worship, ask staff, are we likely to have a solution that will allow them to make the changes in order to provide the service when it's needed? And if you can't answer, just tell me shut up or whatever.
I'm still in the draft stages, but there'll be a few options provided to council, some of which would not be supported legislatively, but I'm putting in there. And then the recommended one by staff, which I'm hoping is a happy medium, but will involve the applicant being willing. So stay tuned.
Thank you for that, Ms. Campbell. And then, yes, here's our resolution here that will go to UBCM. And that's it for the correspondence as far as I know. So motion to receive the correspondence by Councillor McMath and seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. I meant to do that ahead of time, sorry. All those in favor, opposed, that's carried unanimously. Council and CAO verbal reports. Perhaps Councillor Bateman would like to share any bits on the library?
Well, the library. Yes, the development permit process continues, and we're right down to the home stretch on it. And also the lease agreement is being massaged into shape. One of the big issues facing Viral is the fact that construction costs have gone haywire on the South Island. As Councillor Beddoes can affirm with the Sea Park extension, they have a approved borrowing bylaw for $6 million. They've also tapped in to $1 million from their reserve fund, so that's $7 million. We are, as a district, ensuring that Viral is responsible for services. You know, the road itself, sidewalks. Because in the Lot A plan, we all saw there's a central road there. As the first on the lot, it's a requirement of the developer to put in that infrastructure. So the costs are significant, and with these, once the development permit is approved by council, willing, who should I say, Homer willing? No. God willing, that we approve it, then they will go to tender, and then we'll get a real-world figure. And we'll have to see what that number is, and then move onwards. So that's the Viral report.
Thank you, Councillor Bateman, and for all your work on that file for us.
To our district staff and Mr. Howitt, Ms. Campbell have been working extensively with Viral staff and the architect and others to make this thing happen. So, all good things come to those who wait and wait.
Okay. Anything else? So council is away to FCM, different departure times, and then I'm taking a bit of a break. And we'll be back on late on the following Wednesday. So acting mayor for June? You're still acting mayor? Okay, so that'll be Councillor St. Pierre. So you're coming back on the Monday following FCM. So you'll be on deck. I'm contactable. I'll just be in Vancouver, but definitely contactable. And then Councillor Bateman continues to sign checks, so that'll be the case for next week. There may be a bunch. I don't think there's any this week, because if there is, I have to sign it Wednesday morning. Yeah, so Councillor St. Pierre.
Just a little shout out for Councillor Beddoes and Councillor McMath, who kicked some butt at the horseshoe pitch. Earned me some chocolate. Well done. I enjoyed that. So that was one. I also attended it seemed like a good chunk of Sooke, the new Green Deal event at Fernwood Community Centre last week. It was an interesting sort of germinal thing that's happening in terms of grassroots activism towards climate action. Not sure exactly what will come with it, but a lot of Sooke people were there, so that was interesting, given they made their way to Victoria. All of us traveling in different vehicles, I'm sure, but let's not go there. Yeah, I think that was it. That was it.
Great, thank you very much. And then, yeah, we've worked through some difficult matters, but thank you very much, Mr. Schaefer, for all of your work there. Okay, so next we have a notice of motion from Councillor McMath, and that is that Council directs staff to connect with the service provider of the newly installed monopole at the corner of Otter Point Road and Wadhams Way to discuss the possibility of an art installation. So this is here just for notification to be debated at the June 10th meeting. Thank you, Councillor McMath. We do have some rise in reports that Council directs staff to fund expenses for Lot A due diligence as follows: $15,000 from Council contingency, $10,000 from CAO contingency, and that Council directs staff to initiate each part of the Lot A due diligence work at the appropriate time. So that's just here for information as a rise in report. And also that Council directs staff to circulate the findings report from the Sooke Community Advisory Committee to Council as well. And that the May 27, 2019 regular meeting of Council be adjourned. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre and seconded by Councillor Beddoes. All those in favor, opposed, carried unanimously. Thank you very much, everyone.